Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, American Comics. The Savior Starting from the Vampires. Chapter 41. Dao Feng was wearing sunglasses and a black leather jacket, walking slowly in the empty hall that looked like a large factory. More and more vampires ran out of the room on one side, opened their mouths, exposed their ferocious fangs, and glared fiercely at their old enemy. Slowly posing as a boss holding a sword in front of him, the Blade Warrior showed no expression on his face. The next moment, with a fierce roar, a vampire with little experience in the world and a hot blood rushed over first. However, his seemingly agile figure was reduced to ashes by a sword as fast as lightning. This sword is like a signal to start the battle. The figure of the blade is constantly interspersed between the vampires. His master-level fighting skills allow him to avoid the vampires, offensive that is far beyond ordinary people, while making quick counterattacks. With roars, more and more vampires began to give up, and once again cut a fat vampire into ashes with one sword, and the blade went straight towards the vampire who was escaping quickly. When chasing a vampire who was rushing towards a room on one side, the vampire who was about to enter the room suddenly flew out like a cannonball in an instant, and Dao Bian was shocked. A figure wearing medieval armor, holding a sword in his right hand and a shield in his left hand, instantly jumped out of the room, and the broadsword instantly slashed at his silver sword. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere, and the power of the attacker seemed to be stronger than him, and the blade's body was instantly pushed back. Staring at the samurai who looked like he had stepped out of the Middle Ages, a solemn look finally flashed across his dark-skinned face. The visitor is none other than Drake, the ancestor of vampires. They met in a building a few days ago, but it was a pity that this guy escaped. Although there was no serious fight, the blade was still extremely vigilant. This guy can beat Lin Ju away. With a sinister smile on his lips, Derek looked at the tall man in front of him who exuded an inexplicable aura, but his eyes shone with an inexplicable luster. Human and vampire. What a wonderful combination. However, Dao Feng did not intend to discuss his origins with him. He jumped forward in an instant and slashed away with the silver sword in his hand. Between the sword and the silver sword, the two people quickly shuttled through the hall. Dang, dang, dang. In just a moment, the two were fighting inextricably. A flash of appreciation flashed in Drake's eyes. Blade's fighting skills were recognized by him. In addition, Blade's identity as a descendant of a vampire made him evaluate him even more than Lin Ju. At this moment, above the hall, a vampire smiled ferociously, raised the gun in his hand, and pointed it at the blade that was fighting with Drake from a distance. Just when he was about to shoot, an arrow feather instantly penetrated his body. The fire flashed past the location where the arrow feather hit. He let out a scream and was reduced to ashes on the spot. At the same time, the vampires who came out of the passage on the other side and rushed to support them roared and rushed towards Albert, who fired arrows. As a senior vampire hunter, Albert was not afraid of three vampires at the same time. First, he shot one vampire to ashes with a clean arrow, and then the two sides fought at close range. The silver dagger in his hand quickly penetrated in front of the vampires, but these vampires were obviously not vegetarians. Quickly dodging Albert's dagger, a vampire rushed forward in an instant, trying to knock Albert to the ground. However, the next moment, his forward body hit hard the long bow in Albert's hand, above. A white laser flashed past, and his body was instantly reduced to ashes. This long bow could actually emit dazzling incandescent light. Seeing the critical situation, the other vampire retired, but Albert seized the opportunity and the dagger in his hand instantly penetrated his throat. Roar. With an unwilling roar, he also turned into ashes. More and more vampires noticed the situation here. They did not dare to join the battle between Drake and the Blade Warriors, and they all rushed towards Albert. At this time, Albert's expression finally changed. She looked at 6 or 7 vampires with serious eyes, just when she was a little nervous and was about to come into contact with the vampires. A strange scream sounded from behind, and Hannibal's figure quickly rushed to her side, holding a silver dagger in his hand and an exaggerated arc on his face. As soon as he came up, he couldn't help but taunted. In an instant, the expressions of all the vampires changed drastically, and the vampires who were originally hesitant also rushed over. Looking at this scene, Albert couldn't help but want to turn around and give his teammate who liked to talk a lot of words a loving punch. Looking at the swarm of vampires, Hannibal seemed to realize that he had magnified the problem. The moment the two came into contact, a fierce battle broke out. Although Hannibal was a little out of tune, his fighting skills were obviously not bad. He was not inferior even to vampires who had comparative advantages in strength and speed. One person dominated two vampires quickly, weaving between the two people, blocking attacks while quickly counter-attacking. From time to time, it is mixed with the fragrance he blurts out, and the picture looks extremely different. However, Albert on the other side was much more relaxed. Thanks to Hannibal's constant bombardment, he really attracted most of the hatred. There were only 3 vampires who came to attack her, and most of the remaining vampires rushed towards Hannibal. Seeing more and more vampires, Hannibal, who felt something was wrong, took the lead and ran back the way he came, taunting as he ran. The two people who were fighting fiercely below at this moment didn't care about the turmoil happening above. Blade hit the wall heavily, looking deeply at Drake, who grinned, showing his crocodile-like fangs and roaring at him. His eyes flashed slightly, and Blade pretended to be in pain. The next moment, Drake rushed over, and the greatsword in his hand chopped him fiercely, just when the greatsword was about to hit Blade. The silver sword in his hand quickly attacked, quickly threw the greatsword aside, and then kicked Drake's abdomen fiercely. This sudden attack instantly made Drake's body fly backwards, and the power of Blade should not be underestimated. The figure rushed forward quickly, and Blade came to Drake's somewhat dazed body in the blink of an eye, and punched him hard on the side of his face. In an instant, Drake's body hit the glass of the exhibition wall on one side, and the glass shattered instantly, and his body hit the wall of the building on one side. His face twisted in midair, gradually turning into a monster. At this moment, Drake became furious for the defeat in the battle. When he fell to the wall, he turned around, stomped hard on the wall, and suddenly rushed to the front of Blade, hugged his body hard, and threw him to the ground. Boom, boom. The power of this blow was extraordinary. The ground made of reinforced concrete cracked instantly, and countless gravel fragments flew up. Even with the physique of a half-human and half-vampire, it was difficult for the Blade to slow down quickly. He stared in shock at Derek, who was sitting on top of him and roaring violently. "I am the god of vampires." Roaring to the sky, Drake's figure in a furious state twisted and slowly changed. Under Blade's shocked gaze, his flesh and blood slowly exposed his skin. Within a moment, a demon-like monster appeared in front of him. On the other side, while Blade and Drake were fighting a bloody battle, Hannibal, who was constantly spitting out fragrance and full of taunts, rushed towards the road he came from, followed by angry vampires. Every vampire grinned and showed its long fangs. They all wanted to suck the man in front of them dry while escaping while still mocking them. "You little fools are the only ones who have the courage to continue to follow me. If you catch up with me, I will chew my ass for you." Looking at the vampires approaching quickly, Hannibal's mouth was unforgiving, but his face became more and more distorted. He couldn't help shouting, "Shet! Lynn, my dearest friend, come and save me." Just when the vampires were about to throw him to the ground, a black shadow flashed across Hannibal's side. The breeze wrapped around his body gently blew the tips of Hannibal's hair, and the distorted expression on his face instantly turned into an exaggerated smile. "You little idiots will all die here." The corner of his mouth turned into a toothy grin and he laughed. Boom! The sound of heavy physical bombardment sounded behind Hannibal. A flamboyant smile appeared on Hannibal's face, and he turned to look at the feast of slaughter behind him. The head of the vampire at the front was instantly overflowing with blood. Under Lin Ju's extraordinary hearing, a slight bone-cracking sound was heard. His entire figure was like a cannonball, knocking the vampires behind him to the ground. Lin Ju's figure flashed across the afterimages, and the silver sword in his hand was swung at high speed, like streaks of lightning swirling around his body. One vampire after another screamed in terror, and then turned into ashes. Hannibal's face was sarcastic, and he looked very excited. From time to time, he cursed the incompetence of these vampires, as if he was the one fighting the vampires now. Between punches and kicks, the bodies of vampires one after another flew out like cannonballs. At this time, Lin Ju's whole body exuded overwhelming power, shrouding these vampires. What kind of monster is this? The leaders among the vampires showed fear on their faces and swam upstream one by one. While directing their younger brothers to rush forward, they themselves quickly rushed towards the rear passage. However, before they had taken a few steps, they froze in place, their faces extremely ugly, looking at Albert, who was holding a bow with one hand and blocking their way. Roar! Listening to the screams of the younger brothers behind them, these vampire leaders could no longer hold back and rushed forward one after another. For a moment, they were intertwined with Albert. Hannibal, who was behind Lin Ju, seemed to have noticed what was going on behind him. He finally thought that he should step forward to help, but looking at Lin Ju, who was killing everyone among the vampires, he didn't know how to intervene. Being out of touch for a while, he also felt a little embarrassed. With a lightning-fast palm, a vampire's head was flipped 360 degrees, and Lin Heng quickly rushed towards Albert, who was struggling at the moment. Hannibal behind him also rushed over. Albert looked dejectedly at the vampires passing through him one after another. Fortunately, thanks to the eagerness of these vampires to escape, no vampire tried to kill her. Bite it under your mouth. Lin Ju rushed over and grabbed the last vampire who was about to run past Albert into the passage. With the force of his arms, he threw the vampire leader's body heavily to the ground in an instant. Roar! Before he could finish his roar, the silver sword in his hand swiped across his pale neck, and scarlet flames spurted out from his neck. In the end, under the gaze of the three people, the vampire's skin turned into ashes first, then its flesh, and finally even its bones dissipated into powder. Looking into the depths of the passage, the frightened vampires no longer knew where they were running. Slowly helped Albert up. Thanks. Albert looked at Lin Ju with a complex expression. If Lin Ju didn't have any characteristics that matched a vampire, she would have doubted whether he was really the ancestor of vampires. Lin Ju slowly patted the woman's shoulder. As a human being, daring to fight these vampires is an extremely brave thing in itself. Let's go help Blade. Albert on the side couldn't help shouting, she couldn't wait to see the death of the vampire family. Soon, the three returned to the factory again, but the scene in front of them shocked them. Drake, who transformed into a monster, punched Blade's body hard to the ground. The masonry cracked and a heavy roar resounded throughout the factory. Seeing this fierce scene, Hannibal's face twitched. He couldn't imagine how painful it was. Lin Ju also looked gloomy. He suddenly thought that when Albert ran to stop the vampire, he did not help Blade like in the original plot, which led to the current situation where Blade was unilaterally beaten by Drake. Watching Drake's lips spread to the side, revealing a flesh thorn that looked like a vampire in the Blood series, but much smaller than that flesh thorn, he quickly thrust it into Blade's neck. Blade's head quickly turned to the side, and then he swept his leg hard, kicking the extremely burly Drake's body to the side. At the same time, he quickly left Drake's side and looked at the steel-like monster with a heavy expression. One heavy kick after another hit his broad chest. However, Drake, who had turned into a monster at this time, seemed to be more powerful. His figure only swayed slightly, and he walked towards the solemn-looking Blade step by step. Even Lin Ju couldn't do anything about him in this state. At this moment, a clear drink came from behind. The familiar voice instantly attracted Derek's attention. His face changed slightly, and he turned to look behind him. It was Lin Ju who jumped down from the aisle above. At the same time, while Drake's attention was distracted, Albert, who was at the top of the stairs, instantly shot out the arrow feathers equipped with the genetic potion. However, even though Drake's attention was focused on Lin Ju for an instant, he reacted subconsciously, grabbed the arrow containing the genetic virus with one hand, and then threw it to the ground. Derek stared fiercely at Albert, who dared to launch a sneak attack on him, and then let out a violent roar. However, the next moment, an afterimage appeared in front of him, and a heavy punch hit Drake's hideous head. Lin Ju felt as if he had hit a huge piece of steel, no, something harder than steel, and his fist ached with pain. Drake's body finally fell to one side. Compared with the blade, Lin Ju's power is more powerful. Boom! Drake's body, which was hit hard for the first time in his transformation state, instantly tilted to one side, but he only bent down slightly. As for Lin Ju, who launched the attack, he stepped forward again and drew out the long sword from behind with one hand. The next moment, his lightning-fast sword instantly hit Drake's abdomen. It was like a metal collision, and Drake's face was exposed. Smiling ferociously, he had no intention of resisting. He used Lin Ju's sword to close the distance and hit Lin Ju's chest with a heavy punch. Boom! This powerful blow made Lin Ju feel the crazy vibrations of various organs in his body. A warm current in his chest surged up to his throat, and in an instant, a mouthful of blood spurted out. The white, crystal-clear blood shines with some inexplicable luster in the air under the sunlight. Oh my God! White blood! Hannibal, who was sitting on the top of the stairs, stared at the pale blood scattered on the ground in shock. Not to mention it was him, even Albert on the side was stunned. However, Drake, who was in the middle of the battle between the two sides, flashed a hint of surprise and hit Lin Ju with a set of combination punches. However, at this time, Lin Ju had already reacted, put his arms on his chest, and withstood the punch. One heavy attack after another. When he received the third heavy punch, he kicked his legs hard to the side and directly kicked Drake's body away. Boom! Amidst the heavy roar, Drake's body was embedded in the factory wall made of steel. Roar! The next moment, he rushed out again, but the blade at this moment finally slowed down because of Lin Ju's help, and he rushed straight towards Drake, and the sharp blade in his hand slashed towards Drake fiercely. The two exchanged blows quickly, and at the same time, Lin Ju's body turned into an afterimage and passed over the two of them, and quickly slashed at Drake's muscular back with a sword. As the turbid blood spilled, Drake's body staggered slightly, but he, who was not afraid of silverware, smiled ferociously and quickly slapped the blade away with a palm. He turned around and rushed towards Lin Ju again. Compared with the blade, Lin Ju brought him the strongest crisis. Coupled with the humiliation when he first woke up, his hatred for Lin Ju was not single-minded. Looking at the arrow feathers tied with virus potion on the ground, Lin Ju quickly retreated backwards. Although he really couldn't do anything to Drake at the moment, he still had considerable confidence in his speed. Sure enough, after chasing for a while, Drake gave up the idea of killing Lin Ju first. With a gloomy look on his face, he looked at the guarded blade again. At the same time, Hannibal and Albert, who had watched the battle scene with their eyes, could not care less about the anxiety and doubts in their hearts. Amidst the roar of the vampire leader, vampires came out of the passage on one side from time to time and headed towards the two of them, coming in a hurry. The scene instantly fell into anxiety. The body shuttled quickly, and an afterimage flashed by. Lin Ju hastily dodged Drake's punch. Seeing this opportunity, the blade on the other side slashed Drake to the ground with a fierce knife. Before Drake could counterattack, Lin Ju, who was on the other side, kicked Drake away with another fierce kick. Roar! Realizing that the battle situation seemed to be changing subtly, Drake came to his senses and looked coldly at Blade, who was retreating slightly. He wanted to kill Blade by force, and then deal with the difficult Lin Ju. Lin Ju's eyes flashed slightly as he looked at Drake, who was rushing toward the blade, as if he was going to kill him. The silver sword pierced through like lightning, slashing at Drake's back. Roar! With a roar, Drake slapped the blade away again with a palm. He ignored Lin Ju behind him and rushed towards the blade again. However, compared to him, Lin Ju was faster. After a series of blurry afterimages, Lin Ju appeared in front of the blade and stabbed Derek, whose eyes suddenly changed with a fierce sword. The long sword shining with silvery white luster instantly pierced the somewhat astonished Drake. Roar! The scarlet pupils were shaking at high speed. Even though Drake had strong resistance to silverware, he still couldn't withstand penetrating injuries. He subconsciously wanted to grab Lin Ju, but Lin Ju stepped on his chest with a lightning-like kick, and used the force to pull out the silver sword in his hand. The bright red blood swayed down, and Derek staggered back. He covered his bleeding chest with one hand, grinning ferociously at the corner of his mouth. Under Lin Ju's twinkling eyes, he slowly took his hand away. However, the moment he saw the wound, his smile froze on his face. The wound that was supposed to heal quickly showed no signs of healing at all. The muscles all over his body were rapidly dissolving, and he transformed into a human form again. He stared blankly at Lin Ju, who was slowly walking towards him. "What did you do?" "Nothing, I'll send you to the ending you deserve." Lin Ju had a smile on his face. When he knew that all of Drake's attention had shifted to Blade, he knew that the opportunity had come. He picked up the genetic virus that Albert had shot before and inserted it into Drake's back. Because the needle was so small, the pain was insignificant to Drake in the transformed state. So he didn't notice it at all. After all, if Drake had not turned all his attention to the blade, Lin Ju would not have been able to inject the virus agent with the fragile needle on Drake's body. It would have easily been damaged by the battle. It's really hard to finish. Seeing Derek collapse to the ground, Lin Ju quickly rushed to him and floated one hand above his head. Deprivation. Transparent fluctuations instantly enveloped Drake, who had not completely transformed into his human form. A strange heat surged toward Lin Ju, and he felt his already tough muscles solidify again, and powerful forces emerged in his body. The excitement in his heart was hard to suppress. At this moment, Lin Ju's body was undergoing unknown changes, exuding waves of soreness and numbness all the time. The bruises and pain from the battle quickly disappeared, and he slowly retracted his palms. Lin Ju looked at Drake, who looked pale at the moment. However, Drake's attention was not on Lin Ju, who had transformed him into this state, but on the blade that was slowly rising from the ruins. The vampire alien race has been looking for the best bloodline, and you are the existence we have been looking for. After saying this, looking at Dao Feng's thoughtful expression, he smiled miserably and slowly closed his eyes. At the same time, roars suddenly came from the top of the hall. Lin Ju looked around and saw that the vampires who had just fought with Albert and others fell to the ground one after another, including the vampire leader. Their bodies began to spontaneously ignite, and then they all melted. For ashes. Lin Ju knew that this was the effect of the genetic virus medicine. When the genetic virus drug disintegrates Drake, the ancestor of vampires, then all his descendants will die. But there was an exception. He looked at Blade, who had not changed in any way. This is why Drake finally turned his attention to Blade. He knew that Blade would survive in this world as the last vampire to exist. Amid the exclamations of Hannibal and others, Lin Ju, whose body slowly became blurred, said goodbye with a smile on his face, and then disappeared out of thin air, leaving behind a few people full of complicated emotions. The bright sunshine shone on his cheeks, making Lin Ju feel warm both physically and mentally. Looking at Emily, who was talking to Dam, a smile appeared on his lips. He liked this feeling. With a thought in his mind, Lin Ju couldn't wait to bring up his personal panel. Lin Ju. Dimension points. 310. Natal talent. Dimension deprivation. Abilities. Immortality. Body of the ancestor, remnant of the archangel, blood god, not a concept. His eyes paused slightly on the blood god. A stream of detailed information about this ability flowed into his mind. Blood god. The origin of the vampire family in the Marvel Universe. He has super speed, unparalleled strength, and incredible self-healing ability. He can resist all natural diseases, can transform into any form, and can transform into the blood god form. Infect other creatures and turn them into vampires. Marvel Universe. Transform into a vampire. Sensing the information in his mind, Lin Ju's eyes flickered slightly. On the eastern outskirts of Gotham, in a seemingly abandoned factory, black cars slowly drove in. As the car drove into the factory, the originally dim light became brighter and brighter, and the rusty walls turned into brand new rigid walls that exuded a silver luster. Inside the factory, in a room entirely dominated by white, a man in a white coat with gold eye sockets looked crazy, constantly shuttling between various instruments. Outside the laboratory, as the car door opened, several people in black windbreakers hurriedly came to him. "Doctor, how's it going?" A rich voice came slowly, and a tall man with a strong sense of oppression stared at the white-robed doctor in front of him, who was obsessed with experiments. "Incredible, incredible. Where did you get this liquid from?" The doctor suddenly turned his head. At this moment, his eyes were filled with bloodshot eyes, as if he was suffering from pink eye disease, and the whites of his eyes were almost invisible. Anyone with this kind of mental outlook would be shocked by it. But behind him, the faces of the people dressed in black showed no signs of movement. The burly man at the head just stared at him, waiting for his reply. Looking at the stern faces of the people in front of him, the doctor was not persistent. He quickly came to the instrument and took out a cage from a closed iron box. There is a mouse with white hair in the cage. It keeps making squeaking sounds and jumping back and forth from time to time, looking very energetic. It has been completely confirmed that the liquid you sent contains some special substance that can rejuvenate living bodies. It is obviously an old mouse, but it quickly regained its vitality after absorbing a little bit. After such a long time, observation of time has confirmed that he has completely recovered to his most youthful and vigorous stage. Excitement flashed across the man's face. Nothing could shock him more than immortality, not even extraordinary ones. Can this blood be reused? Blood? What kind of creature's blood is this? The man with a flexible mind and extremely quick reaction noticed a certain key point in an instant, but the man in black did not continue to speak, but just stared at him, and a faint pressure enveloped the man. Putting his hands on his head, the man in white robe made a gesture of surrender and said helplessly, "This thing has no side effects at all, and no drug resistance has been seen yet. In theory, if you keep taking it, you can stay young." Quote. Very good. After getting the information he wanted, the man didn't even wait for the doctor to say anything else, and left with a group of men in black. This guy. The doctor's helpless words came from the empty venue. After walking out of the factory, the burly man answered the phone and conveyed all the information he had just received. This time the information was confirmed and their plan would officially start. The man slowly hung up the phone and looked deeply into the darkness. People dressed in black appeared in front of him one after another. There were nearly 20 of them, and they all exuded a faint wave of energy. "Boss, it seems that the organization is going to take serious action this time." The faint words rang in my ears, and a slender man in black stood in front of the burly man. "Judge, that guy seems to be in conflict with the masked club. A few days ago, the Grayson family stopped my action." Behind the burly man, a person in black said lightly. She had an extremely slim figure and was incompatible with the muscular people in black around her. The burly man was silent, his eyes were deep, and he didn't know what he was thinking. "Everyone is mobilized for this operation." Quote. The people in black standing around looked at each other, obviously not expecting such a result. As their figures disappeared into the darkness, a man with a sniper rifle slowly lowered his binoculars in a tall building far away outside the factory. "Good guy. When did we get so many dangerous guys in Gotham?" "How?" Behind him, leaning against the wall pillar, was a man with his hands on his chest, a cigarette in his mouth, puffing away smoke. "Don't act like it's none of your business. There are so many people from that organization. Something must have caught their attention. Things next door haven't been sorted out. Now they all flock to our Gotham. The bosses really have the foresight to let us keep an eye on that guy. I would like to have a try with them to see if they are really as unfathomable as the rumors say." "Ha, you are so awesome, don't call me by my name during the fight, I still want to live a little longer." The man curled his lips and went straight downstairs, not paying attention to his partner who was still fussing about his awesomeness. His goal and mission had been completed. He had to go home and sleep, and he had to go to work tomorrow. After taking a deep puff, he dropped the cigarette butt on the ground and stamped it out. The man came to the window and jumped down. With a heavy landing sound, he quickly ran towards the woods on the outskirts of Gotham. At this time, the person who had just walked downstairs looked helpless. Looking at his companion's leaving figure, he was a little envious and a little gloating. The bright moonlight reflected in the woods, and the man's figure shuttled through the woods. His speed was extremely fast, and every step he took left a deep footprint. He ran for more than a quarter of an hour, and the trees were sparse. He stopped. In front of me were brightly lit streets and alleys. After walking for a while, I passed through 2 streets and alleys. I stopped in front of a bar with a faint light and gently opened the door of the bar. Huge noises rang out from the bar, mostly hearty laughter and the clinking of wine glasses. "Sir, what would you like to drink?" Emily's crisp voice sounded, and Holland's eyes paused slightly on her. He lowered his voice and said gently, "Give me a bottle of whiskey." "Okay, you can find a seat first, and I'll send it to you when the time comes." Emily laughed softly. Sitting slowly in the armchair, Holland kept looking at the drinkers around him. They were playing finger-guessing games with each other, drinking, and discussing interesting things in the past few days. Most of them were about the new superhero in the East District, the Judge. "Ha, since the Judge became a god in one battle, I now feel that our Wallier Street has become more harmonious and stable. Not only Wallier Street, but now the entire East District seems to be lingering with the atmosphere of rejecting crime. It feels like it's even better than Batman. Beyond Batman, that's not true. He has the power of the whole Gotham. He can be found in all the criminal cases in Gotham. The judge of our East District has never left the East District. Silently listening to the words of these people, Huolunhua took the wine glass handed over, and his eyes paused slightly on the waiter. Somehow, he felt a hint of danger. Lin Ju skillfully put the tablecloth on his shoulders and quickly shuttled through the crowd. Because Emily's tavern only had him as a waiter, and Dam didn't come today for some reason, so he seemed much busier. Seeing a petite figure trying to get out of the bar booth, Lin Ju rushed forward to stop him. I can do it alone. How can that be? Emily pushed Lin Ju away like a little adult, and delivered the remaining wine on the bar to the delivery location one by one. Her arrival also made everyone in the bar shout, "Oh, since Lin came, Emily has rarely handed me wine." A big man with a beard, with a smile on his face, looked at Emily's figure coming over, as if he was looking at his daughter. Hee hee. The young man next to him laughed non-stop, his eyes fixed on Emily's figure and never moved away. Looking at Emily running around in front of the wine tables, Lin Ju sighed helplessly. Fortunately, most of the regulars of Emily's tavern were law-abiding good citizens, and there were no harassment incidents. After delivering all the wine to the destination, Emily clapped her hands gently, and looked at Lin Ju, who was sorting the bottles in front of the wine rack with a little trepidation. Lin, quote. Lin Ju looked at the hesitant girl with some surprise. I'm going to expand the business of our tavern. Emily's face flushed and she said loudly. That's great, thank you for your support. Emily ran away like she was escaping, her heart pounding. Recently, she didn't know why, she was particularly concerned about Lin Ju's opinion. This time was the first time she made up her mind to expand her business. She wanted to get Lin Ju's affirmation, which would make her feel inexplicably at ease. Coming to the cabinet of the tavern, Lin Ju saw the busy figure humming an unknown and brisk tune. Why do you want to expand your business? His words instantly made the girl's body stiffen slightly. Emily didn't turn around and said in a brisk tone, this is all thanks to the judge. If it weren't for him to deter those criminals, our East District would not be calm for a while, and now the business would not be so good. Emily's tone was mixed with admiration and respect, which made Lin Ju feel a little happy. I think he still needs to work harder. Emily, what do you think he should do next? Lin Ju smiled tentatively, looking at the girl who was nodding her head and thinking about something. I think he has done a great job. By the way, I hope he can pay attention to safety. There are many powerful super criminals lurking in our East District. I heard this from my father. Emily's tone was mixed with a trace of worry. Oh, many powerful super criminals. At this time, Emily did not notice that a flash of red light flashed in Lin Ju's eyes behind her. Boss! A shout came from the outer room, and Lin Ju left quickly and rushed to the bar. Huolunhua stared at Lin Ju's running figure, his voice slightly hoarse, another bottle of cocktail. Lin Ju quickly shuttled in front of the wine rack, put the wine that had been prepared and sorted long ago on the plate, and then quickly walked towards the man. With a signature smile, Lin Ju placed the bottle of wine on the man's table, removed the lid for him, and poured the wine into his glass, which was emitting a blue halo due to the refraction of light. Are you still hiring in your store? The faint words echoed in Lin Ju's ears. He looked at the man staring at him in front of him with some surprise, and the smile on his face did not change. You have to ask Boss Emily about this, I am just a waiter. Yeah. At this time, on the street nearly 1 kilometer away from Huolire Street, Dan M's body fell heavily to the ground. Dead fat man, don't you look at the road when you walk, are you in a hurry to reincarnate? Oh, sorry. Dan M apologized repeatedly, looking at the man who was looking down at him with a fearful look in his eyes, with various tattoos all over his body. He subconsciously wanted to kick Dam, but his partner beside him quickly grabbed him. You don't want your life. This street has been haunted by the judge. The man paused slightly, a trace of fear flashed across his face, and he looked around in a panic. Under the dim lights, there were still bustling people walking on the street. They didn't pay too much attention to what was going on here. Their eyes quickly passed through the darkness at the corner of the street, and the man felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. Somewhat embarrassed, he pulled back his feet, took a sip at Dam, and then strode away quickly with his companions. Slowly climbing up from the snow, patting the footprints on his body. A trace of sadness flashed across Dam's round face. But soon, he cheered up, slowly held the special card in his pocket, and ran quickly towards Emily's tavern. Boom! As the door of the bar opened, Dam walked into Emily's tavern. The warmth hit his face, which made his face, which was a little stiff from the cold, finally relieved a lot. The corners of his mouth were raised, with a smile on his face, and he met Lin Ju, who was delivering the wine glass at the moment. Damn! Lin Ju immediately noticed this nimble fat man. His expression was beaming and his hands were gesturing in front of him. Lin Ju understood the meaning instantly and pulled Dam slowly into an unattended corner of the bar. Lin, this time I have obtained information about the central area, you must be mentally prepared. There was excitement and doubt on Dam's face, and Lin Ju slowly patted his shoulder. The judge is being targeted. Dam's eyes were constantly looking around, and he spoke quickly, as if he was worried about something, his eyes flashing with vigilance. Being targeted. Yes, this is a saying that has been circulating in the underground world recently. In fact, there is an ancient legend circulating in Gotham City. Behind all the crimes, there is a powerful organization silently standing. This organization has been controlling the Gotham. Oh, Lin Ju became interested immediately. After all, in his impression, there seemed to be no such organization. Although I know that this world cannot be the same as what I have seen before. We all know the name of that organization, but we don't know where they are hiding. They monitor the daily life of everyone in Gotham. They are the real controllers of Gotham. Dam lowered his voice and seemed inaudible in the noisy bar, but Lin Ju's hearing was extraordinary. So don't be pretentious. Court of Owls. Quote. It is said that they have begun to pay attention to the Inquisitor. They have always condoned crime and hate both Batman and the Inquisitor. They are really a cancer in Gotham. Dam looked angry and a little suspicious. Lin Ju was not too panicked. If it were his previous self, he might still pay attention, but now, at least in Gotham, he no longer needs to be too afraid. With the jingling of the door, the guests in the tavern began to return home. Dam and Emily said hello and left. After saying good night to Emily, Lin Ju walked into his room, leaning against the quilt as a habit, listening to the gradually soothing breathing next door. Until a ray of moonlight shone through the curtains on his bed, Lin Ju stood up slowly, trying not to make any noise, opened the window, and scanned the dark streets with his night vision eyes. The next moment, his figure suddenly jumped from the window. The moment he landed, his figure turned into an afterimage and quickly disappeared in the corner of the block. In a certain university, young people in 2s and 3s were walking on a street with few pedestrians. Really, I really saw the judge. A burly young man couldn't help shouting. His companions obviously didn't believe his words, and everyone laughed. This makes young people seem helpless. By the way, if we play so late tonight, will we encounter criminals? You know. A blonde girl with big waves couldn't help but chuckle. It's a joke. It's possible for those criminals to attack us, but they have to run away when they see you. A white young man couldn't help but laugh, but his words were echoed by the people around him. It seemed that everyone believed this seemingly ridiculous statement. However, the girl curled her lips with a look of disdain on her face. I hate it when others put me and my family together. With that said, he jumped out of the crowd and walked quickly towards the darkness at the corner of the street, while the classmates behind him burst out laughing. What on earth is Elena thinking? If it weren't for her, we wouldn't dare to stay until now. That's right, her family is a famous rich man in our East District. Follow her quickly. What if we get too far away and are targeted by other criminals? There is no one to protect us. Ha ha. In the streets where laughter resounded, these people hurriedly followed the girl with smiles on their faces, as if they could feel safe walking beside him. However, things always backfire. Just as this group of people were talking and laughing while driving down the dark alley, a figure suddenly appeared at the bright street entrance ahead, standing quietly in the middle of the street entrance. He seemed to be facing them, but because of the darkness, they couldn't see clearly. Hey, bro, what are you doing there? This group of students all stopped in the middle of the intersection and did not dare to move forward, including Elena. The situation in front of her made her frown, but she was not too panicked and seemed to be relying on something. A male student looked at Elena, then took courage and walked up to her, shouting loudly as he walked slowly. But as he approached and cursed, the man's figure remained motionless, still standing at the intersection where they were moving forward. "Hey, brother, if you want to rob, I can tell you clearly that you have provoked the wrong person." The man yelled loudly. Although his words were arrogant, he did not dare to move forward at this time. His companions behind him, they followed him, and each one of them began to look nervous. They gradually felt an unusual atmosphere. "Elena, my friend, she is from the Grayson family. Brother, you should know Grayson, right?" The man didn't believe in evil and shouted again. The next moment, the figure standing at the intersection finally moved. With everyone's expectant eyes, he slowly walked towards them. The group of students finally panicked and ran backwards, hugging Elena. However, a male student at the back couldn't help but exclaimed, "Who are you?" These people looked around in panic and saw a figure appearing on the street behind them, standing quietly at the intersection where they came from. "Elena, please call the men who are protecting you to come out." A student finally looked at Elena in panic. However, there was a trace of panic on Elena's face. She suddenly realized that something was not quite right. Usually at this time, before she met the criminal, those guys he was held down by his bodyguard who was hiding in the dark. But now, looking at the figures on the two corners of the street, slowly walking towards me and others, my bodyguards made no movement at all. At this moment, the group of students panicked again, and two figures fell to the ground, with blood stains on their suits and leather shoes. "Ah!" The female students in the team were the first to scream in surprise. Even Elena looked at the figure that fell to the ground with a pale face. Her heart fell into the abyss. She recognized the appearance of her personal bodyguard at a glance. That was a well-known boxer in the underground, but he was lying on the ground at this moment, like a dead dog, with short air intake and little air output, as if he was about to die. Looking up in astonishment, he saw a man wearing a black windbreaker and a black cloth around his face jumped from a 3-meter-high building and landed smoothly amidst the exclamations of everyone. "I am from the Grayson family, who are you?" Elena's face turned pale, and she pretended to be calm and shouted. "The Grayson family." The visitor's voice was low, with an inexplicable odor in it, his eyes covered with a layer of black gray were shining, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. Boom! His body hit the wall heavily, and a very strong boy vomited blood instantly. The fist that he originally swung away was blocked in front of him. He looked at the black-clothed man in front of him with fear and slapped him against the wall with a random palm. "Male. It's a super criminal." A male student squatted on the ground with some tears. At this moment, there was really a wolf in front of him and a tiger behind him. Just now, a student tried to run from behind, but was slapped by the man behind him and flew away. Only then did they realize that not only the man who fell from the sky, but also the man blocking their escape was also a transcendent. Elena hid in the crowd with a pale face, watching her classmates fall to the ground, spitting blood. She seemed to see what would happen to her next, and at the same time she secretly hated herself for being so careless. "If I could go home earlier, maybe what happened now wouldn't happen." "Brother, please don't kill me." A male student immediately knelt on the ground and kept kneeling to the man at the back of the team, hoping that he would let him live. The tall man blocking the back casually threw the male student aside and looked at the boy kneeling on the ground expressionlessly. The next moment, a flash of white light flashed, and all the students who paid attention were dumbfounded. They watched with trembling eyes as the boy who was shot in the head slowly lay down on the ground. The bright red liquid slowly soaked under the cover of the night. White snow on the roadside. "Help, is anyone there?" One by one, they began to shout loudly, and these students finally gave up praying and shouted for help. However, the people surrounding them did not come forward, as if to intimidate them, as if they were playing with the prey they had obtained. "Approvers, judges, help." I don't know who shouted this first, but more and more people began to shout the name of the judge. "The judge is in the East District, aren't you afraid at all?" Elena screamed at the top of her lungs. At this time, even she was silently praying in her heart that the judge could appear to save her. Listening to the shouts of this group of students, the people in black didn't seem to panic at all. After a brief pause, they slowly walked towards them. Elena hid in the crowd with a pale face. She secretly dialed the number at home. As for the police station, among the students present, no one knew better than her how unreliable Gotham's police station was. Suddenly, the man who had jumped down from the floor before came straight to the students and slapped a boy with long blonde hair to the ground. His hands directly grabbed Elena, who was pale at the moment, and directly held her bumpy body in his arms. "Let me go." A crisp low drink rang in his ears, and a lustful smile appeared on the man's lips. "The young lady of the Grayson family, her figure does look like that of an aristocrat." The man's hands wandered over Elena's round thighs wrapped in jeans, with a look of intoxication on his face. Elena's hands were tightly imprisoned by one of his hands, unable to break free at all. At this time, her fair face was full of humiliation, and tears slowly slid down and fell on the man's wrist. "Boy, that makes it more fun." The man laughed, and the next moment, his hands went straight towards Elena's upper body. Just when his hands were about to touch the arcs the size of half a watermelon, a strong wind suddenly flashed past. He only felt a pain in his neck. The next moment, his whole body fell backwards. At the same time, his hands also released from Elena's body. Elena, who had lost her restraints, hurriedly walked towards her classmate who was lying on the ground, looking behind her with horrified eyes. At this time, the originally panicked students were silent, and everyone looked at the black-robed figure standing in front of the man in black in shock. A solemn atmosphere spread throughout the streets. As ordinary people, the students felt as if they had met top hunters, and the hairs on their bodies stood on end. Elena, who is at the front, can feel this unprecedented pressure the most, which is much stronger than the man in black who imprisoned her before. Judge. At this moment, the man who fell to the ground was smiling, and his eyes were shining brightly, looking at the tall figure standing in the street. He could feel that the tall figure seemed to contain unparalleled power, just like the feeling he felt when facing the captain. Snap, snap, snap. The sound of unhurried footsteps sounded, and the men in black at both ends of the alley were slowly walking towards Lin Ju. "It seems that your target is me," a deep voice echoed in the alley. "Of course you are." The next moment, the man who fell to the ground suddenly turned over and stood up. With a quick whip kick, there was a strong sound of breaking wind, and he kicked Lin Ju hard. Boom! The ecstasy on his face froze for an instant, and the man felt as if he had kicked a hard piece of iron. Seeing the person blocking his kick with one hand, a creepy shudder suddenly arose in his heart. This feeling that would make ordinary people feel fear made him look excited. The next moment, one of his legs jumped up suddenly, and he kicked Lin Ju's chest hard again in midair. A palm as fast as an afterimage pushed the man's legs to one side, causing his figure to flip in midair. Lin Ju suddenly raised his foot and kicked the man in the chest. Boom! Flying backwards like a cannonball, the man felt a tightness in his chest. He clearly heard the sound of his sternum breaking. He looked at Lin Ju, who was standing in the field without moving at all, with a horrified look. Boom! There was a dazzling gunshot, followed by exclamations one after another. All the students looked at the judge in panic, who was still standing motionless. "Missed." Some doubtful words echoed in the deep alley. At this time, the students looked back and saw that the man in front of the street corner had taken out a long-barreled rifle at some point. "Judge, run!" Elena couldn't help shouting urgently, which made her classmates' expressions change greatly, and they all stepped forward and covered her mouth. The judge ran away. What should they do? The next moment, Lin Ju, who had been motionless, finally moved. As an afterimage flashed by, the man behind the alley was holding two daggers reflecting white light in each hand, staring at the black man who was rushing towards him. Shadow. He felt as if he was facing a bloodthirsty glutton. This was definitely the most terrifying existence in his assassination career. The moment the two came into contact, the dagger in the man's hand flashed with white light and stabbed cleanly towards Lin Ju's head. Lin Ju leaned back slightly, his figure suddenly hid to the side, and quickly dodged this extremely sharp stab. However, the man did not stop what he was doing. He waved the dagger with both hands, like a spinning top, with countless white blades piercing Lin Ju's body. In just 2 seconds, the two exchanged blows quickly. Finally, without Lin Ju's attention, the man's sharp dagger instantly cut through his black robe and stabbed directly into his wrist. The moment the sharp blade hit his wrist, a hint of surprise flashed across the man's face. The next moment, Just as he was about to draw out the dagger, a whip as fast as an afterimage kicked him hard in the abdomen. Then a slap hit him hard on the head. Strong fighting skills. The slightly hoarse words resounded in the deep alley. Lin Ju looked directly at the man who was kicked by him and whose figure was embedded in the wall. At this moment, streams of bright red blood were continuously left on the man's head. His eyes were half closed, and he looked like he was about to die. In that kick just now, Lin Ju did not use all his strength, but he still kicked the man half to death. Coupled with the heavy palm, when he slapped the man's head, Lin Ju could feel the man's skull instantly. Dent. Judge, you can't escape. The low words echoed in the deep alley, and the man's voice was choked with sobs. After saying these words, his head instantly drooped. As for the other side, his companions were all shocked and looked at the change of scene in disbelief. At this moment, a black shadow rushed straight from the depths of the alley, and a sharp slash struck Lin Ju hard. From the position where he was originally standing, the sword strike was silent, and amid the exclamations of Elena and others, it hit Lin Ju's back. The burning pain in his back made Lin Ju turn around in an instant, and kick the man who was sneaking away with a fierce kick. Just as he was about to rush forward and kill the man, black shadows jumped from the roofs on both sides of the street. And down there were so many men in black hiding in the silent streets. Each of these men in black held long knives and slashed fiercely at Lin Ju. In an instant, the swords were radiating, and Lin Ju's figure moved quickly, and the afterimages were interspersed among this group of highly skilled people. Among those with assassination skills. Bang bang bang. The sound of heavy fists, legs and feet clashing. While dodging, Lin Ju quickly exchanged blows with 4 of them. At the same time, he dodged round after round of extremely sharp sword slashes. He leaned back slightly and dodged the attack from one side. Arrow feathers coming. The people who ambushed him this time were well prepared, armed with knives, arrows and hidden guns. In addition, each of these people had good fighting skills. Lin Ju finally felt what it means to be invincible with 2 fists, foot. At the same time, the bodies of these men in black seemed to have been strengthened in some way, and they had physiques that were beyond ordinary people. Like a fist as big as half a head, it struck hard. Lin Ju's eyes flashed slightly, and the next moment he directly punched him. With the dull sound of fists clashing, the tall and powerful man in black instantly flew backwards, but Lin Ju paused slightly. Based on the strength alone, this man was not Lin Ju at all, opponent. However, the next moment, extremely sharp slashes and whip kicks struck again, one attacking Lin Ju's upper body and the other attacking his legs. His eyes suddenly focused, and in an instant, he quickly punched the man beside him and sent him flying backwards. Lin Ju kicked off 1 foot, jumped to the wall, and then climbed up the street wall with his bare hands. A black shadow fell and stepped heavily on his shoulder. Lin Ju's eyes suddenly focused. At this moment, the number of men in black who had joined had reached 12. Fortunately, although this man's strength seemed strong in the eyes of ordinary people, in Lin Ju's eyes, in front of him, he looked like a dwarf. He grabbed his ankle with one hand, and then slammed the 1.8-meter tall man against the wall on one side with one hand. Boom! The bricks shattered, and the man in black instantly fell from the wall. At the same time, Elena and others quickly rushed towards the exit on the side of the alley. At this time, no one in black paid attention to them, and they took this opportunity to slip away quickly. Go out. Elena, who was at the back, couldn't help but look back. Lin Ju's figure disappeared into the darkness of the attic. Her eyes turned to a man in black who was lying on the ground and didn't know what he was doing. It could be vaguely seen that the man in black seemed to be shoveling the snow on the ground and putting it into a sealed box. Then her attention was once again attracted by the battle above the alley. Lin Ju jumped out of the darkness with 1 against 2. While dodging the extremely sharp slashes, he jumped to the top of the attic again. The narrowness of the place was extremely disadvantageous for Lin Ju, and the coordination between these people's attacks was extremely tacit. Within a short moment of fighting, Lin Ju gave up the idea of killing the 2. The sound of breaking wind flashed past. Lin Ju's head tilted slightly to one side. The sound of bursting bricks rang in his ears. His eyes glanced at the 3 darts embedded in the wall. Lin Ju's feet suddenly exerted force, and his body moved quickly, jumping upwards. While the black robes were flying, men in black were knocked down by him from time to time and fell into the alley. When he reached the top of the alley, his eyes paused slightly at the retreating figures of Elena and others, and then jumped down, jumping from the wall on one side to the street in an instant. The people in black in the deep alley also followed closely behind him. Their goals were extremely consistent and seemed to be focused on Lin Ju. At the same time, the fighting in the streets and the shattering of masonry finally attracted the attention of some people who lived here. Some people opened the windows on the second floor and looked out. Suddenly, a series of exclamations and shouts filled the streets. Lin Ju quickly shuttled through the wide streets, with more than a dozen men in black following him with vigorous steps. There seemed to be a considerable gap between the speeds of the two sides. Within a moment, Lin Ju was almost half a street away from these people. Soon he turned around the corner and quickly disappeared into the alley on one side. After losing Lin Ju's figure, the group of men in black did not give up and quickly came to the corner of the street. The man in black who was running at the front just showed his head. A black shadow flashed past, and Lin Ju, who was hiding on one side, punched the incoming man on the head. The man subconsciously blocked his arms in front of him, but Lin Ju's fist was extremely powerful, and as the bones shattered, the man's body flew out instantly and hit the other men in black behind him. Each of these men in black reacted extremely flexibly and quickly dispersed, letting the man's body fall to the ground. They had no intention of caring about their partners and rushed towards Lin Ju. Slowly walking out of the deep alley, Lin Ju looked at the people in black who were rushing towards him. His body was trembling slightly, and he was interspersed among the crowd. With a punch or kick that was as fast as an afterimage, he knocked one after another. A man in black flew out. At this moment, he was in a spacious area and finally let go of his hands and feet. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw several men in black starting to circle behind him. At the same time, sharp blades continued to penetrate his body. It was difficult for him to kill without injury. These guys. Lin Ju's eyes suddenly froze as he punched a man in black in front of him who was trying to dodge to the side again. Bang bang bang. Gunshots rang out one after another through the streets. In an instant, some of the men in black were shot from time to time, and blood spattered everywhere. They hurriedly rushed to the bunker aside. There was actually a third party involved. Taking this opportunity, Lin Ju left behind a series of afterimages and ran quickly into the distance until he reached a remote alley, where his figure quickly disappeared into the darkness. Jumping quickly on the roof of the attic, Lin Ju was thinking about what happened today, while taking out the last cross dart from his back and throwing it aside. Compared with the previous mask club, this group of people it was much more difficult to deal with, and any man in black would require Lin Ju to work hard. His chest rose slightly, and his eyes glanced towards the alley, towards the original street. Guns were ringing there at the moment, and another force was exchanging fire with the people in black. As for the residents watching the battle on the street, they also closed their windows for fear of being hit by stray bullets. At this time, more than 20 men in suits and armed with guns quickly poured into the block. They kept firing their guns, shooting at the group of men in black walking through the streets. Everyone looked serious and had excellent marksmanship. After a brief exchange of fire, the men in black, who used cold weapons as their main weapons, retreated one after another. Among the group of men in suits, a pair of bright eyes quickly scanned the messy neighborhood, and their eyes paused on several men in black who had fallen to the ground. She was looking for that familiar figure. "Judge, are you there?" The crisp words resounded in the deep alley. Elena cautiously looked towards the deep alley. She was surrounded by circles of men in suits and ties. Falling into a dark alley, silent, Elena looked a little disappointed. Originally, she planned to thank the judge. Just as she turned around, the sound of footsteps sounded slowly, and the Grayson family members immediately looked towards the alley with wary expressions. The tall figure shrouded in black robes slowly walked out of the dark alley. Elena looked with joy. At this time, she looked at Lin Ju shrouded in black robes with admiration. He slowly stretched out his black leather-covered hand and handed over the card he had prepared in advance. Quote. Elena took the black card with some confusion, which had a bright red English word on it. Before she could say anything in the next moment, she heard the sound of breaking wind amidst the low-pitched warnings of her men behind her. The tall figures in front of them turned into afterimages, quickly ran to the wall, and then disappeared in front of their eyes. Wait, The girl couldn't help but want to reach out to hold him back, but Lin Ju's figure disappeared from her in the blink of an eye, so fast that she didn't even have a chance to speak. Miss, let's go quickly. The police will be here soon. This may cause some trouble for the master. A man in a suit with the strongest build walked up and said with a solemn face. There was still lingering fear in the corners of his eyes. The extraordinary skill just now shocked him, even if he had been injected with body-strengthening medicine. Okay, I still want to invite him home for dinner. Elena looked downcast and said whimsically, and then left 3 times, until she walked out of the street and stepped into an extended car. The entire neighborhood finally returned to peace. About 5 minutes later, police cars flashed red and blue warning lights and quickly passed through the neighborhood. At this moment, George, who was wearing a police uniform, rushed out of the car first, and his eyes quickly came to the place where Lin Ju fought with the man in black. It seems they are making quite a fuss. The black police officer looked impatiently at a sunken wall with broken masonry and stained blood. On the ground and on the originally white snow, there were bright red blood stains everywhere. Some police officers also found the torn clothing left behind by the men in black, as well as some darts that refracted light. These guys. George looked solemn. When he received the alarm call and learned that the judge was surrounded by a group of men in black, he already realized that something was wrong. He witnessed the strength of the judge with his own eyes, which was far beyond what normal people could stop. But it seems that in this confrontation, the judge also suffered a certain loss. This mysterious force is extraordinary and may not even be a local force in Gotham. It seems that with the arrival of the police, residents living here opened their windows and looked around. You policemen come so late every time. If something goes wrong with the judge, if he dies in our neighborhood, then we will become the criminals of the East District. A tall white man with a bare upper body and thick chest hair roared angrily, and his words were echoed one after another. Oh my God, what's happening to Gotham? These incompetent police officers. Thankfully, the judge rescued the police station in time, but these guys are lucky. They didn't come until they finished beating. Listening to the abuse from the residents in the alley, all the police officers except George looked ugly. Soon, amidst the angry curses of the residents, police cars drove out of the neighborhood in despair. The residents, who had no one to vent to, closed their windows again. The bright moonlight finally shone through the thick dark clouds on the bluestone road of Gotham. Black shadows silently jumped down from a certain Western-style building. The number of these shadows even exceeded those who had confronted Lin Ju before, quantity. Even the 3 men in black standing in front exuded a powerful aura. The man carrying 2 long swords walked slowly to the place where Lin Ju and the men in black first fought. He gently touched the wall with both hands, and then quickly climbed up until he came to the place where Lin Ju once stayed. His deep eyes wrinkled slightly and looked at the remaining red liquid on the wall. He slowly took out something similar to a test tube from the collar of his coat and collected all the red liquid and surrounding snow. He released his palms and jumped to the ground in an instant. The man's eyes looked slightly deeply at the dejected people in the team of men in black behind him. Boss, that guy's strength is really impressive, and his fighting skills are also quite strong. He has a bit of a Chinese flavor. The man in black who had fought with Lin Ju at close range had a pale face and a slightly low voice. However, the man carrying the 2 swords remained silent, just as the group of men in black began to search the alley. Click, click, click. Slightly heavy footsteps sounded slowly, and the leading man looked across the alley. At this moment, 3 masked men in different costumes were slowly walking towards them. The people in black behind them drew their swords or knives one after another, and stared at the 3 people walking towards them with serious faces. If you don't stay in Star City and solve your own problems, why did you come to us? Huo Lunhua stared at the leading masked man and shouted in a low voice. The man in black with 2 swords on his back slightly tilted his head and showed no intention of replying. A slender man in black behind him scolded. The affairs of our organization are not something you can handle with your sharp claws. Go back and tell your boss. Don't affect our plan, otherwise. Drink. The next moment, Huo Lunhua's figure suddenly rushed away, with an extraordinary speed, like a nimble leopard shuttling through the deep alley. In the blink of an eye, he came in front of the man in black, but when his hands were about to grab him, he suddenly rushed away. When facing the female man in black, the man in black at the front suddenly stretched out his hand, and an afterimage flashed past, then he grabbed his collar, then easily lifted his body and threw him to the ground. Go. Boom. The powerful force made Huolunhua's chest feel tight for an instant, followed by a feeling of extreme pain. However, after undergoing various inhuman training, he quickly reacted and grabbed the masked man's collar with both hands. However, the man's hand on his chest suddenly turned around and lifted him up. He swung one leg out and kicked him hard in the abdomen. Boom. His body instantly flew backwards and was caught by two companions behind him. The three of them looked a little ugly, and they all took 3 steps back before barely releasing their strength. The man in black, who was carrying 2 swords, slowly put his hands behind his back, turned and left, without any intention of saying a word. Huolunhua looked at the group of men in black with an ugly expression as they quickly shuttled through the deep alleys without making any sound. Their figures disappeared into the thick night in the blink of an eye. These guys. The man carrying a sniper rifle behind him cursed angrily. Although his face was full of reluctance, he had no intention of taking action just now. The companion on the side curled his lips. Huolunhua, you should really restrain your temper. Those guys are not something that we can deal with, especially the one at the head, who is probably a famous killer of that organization. I didn't kill you, it's already given his face. Ni. Huolunhua stopped another friend who was a little angry. He stared into the dark night, his eyes were blank, and he didn't know what he was thinking. What? You bought the next door? Lin Ju looked at the girl in front of him with shock, her little head held high, her face full of pride, and she looked like she was waiting for praise. Yes, and the price is extremely reasonable, 20% lower than the market price. I heard that the family was planning to move to Central City, saying that the security there was much better than that in Gotham. They had long wanted to sell the house in Gotham. Quote, Central City. Is the security good? 3 question marks appeared on Lin Ju's head, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Okay, workers will be decorating it in the next few days. Then we will cut the middle wall, so that our tavern will be nearly twice the size, plus the rooms on the 2nd floor, ha. Having said this, Emily's eyes narrowed slightly and sparkled with crystal luster, as if she was thinking about something beautiful. Don't you want to go to school? Lin Ju said with some helplessness. If such a sum of money is used to purchase the house next door, Emily's small coffers will be emptied in an instant. Quote. We will definitely earn it back soon. Emily clenched her little fist, with a firm look on her delicate little face. Lin Ju put his hands on his forehead, and he could almost feel the domineering aura igniting from Emily's petite body. Soon, one worker after another stopped outside the tavern on Wallier Street, and the customers who frequented the area also stopped and talked about it. Dam was interspersed among the crowd. Being a bit fat and wearing a heavy coat, he struggled to get out of the crowd with some difficulty. Forrest, looking at Lin Ju directing the workers to move, Dam couldn't help but wave his hands and shout loudly. Soon, under the guidance of Lin Ju, the surrounding crowd dispersed, and Dam quickly came to his side. Good guy, Emily. You are so bold. Looking at the girl running towards him, Damu suddenly changed his tone of voice and showed a flattering expression on his face. Ha ha. When she came forward, the girl's eyes narrowed slightly after hearing the compliment, as if she had once again confirmed her decision in her heart. Seeing the girl starting to direct the workers, Dam quietly pulled Lin Ju aside. Lin, we found one in the central area. Dam said quickly while scanning the people on the block. Oh, Lin Ju's eyes lit up. The workers' renovation continued until early in the morning. As night fell, Emily kept bowing and thanking the workers. They talked and laughed and got on the truck they came from. Lin Ju followed Emily, and the two quickly returned to the store. At this moment, the layout of the store had undergone amazing changes. Thanks to the opening of the connecting wall with the next door, the originally small bar was now wider. More than doubled. Emily even intended to convert the 2nd floor into a place similar to a KTV club. This made Lin Wadu doubt that the seemingly cute and beautiful girl in front of him had the potential to become a gangster. Looking at the girl who said goodnight to him and ran away, Lin Ju also came to his room. As always, he didn't slowly get up from the bed until he heard the sleeping breathing of the girl next door. Recalling Dam's words during the day in his mind, Lin Ju's figure quickly jumped out and jumped from the 2nd floor. With his feet on the ground, his figure quickly shuttled through the streets. In the midnight Gotham, there were only a few pedestrians on the road. Apart from tramps with miserable life experiences, they were also bold and lawless criminals. Until his figure quickly disappeared deep into the street, and a slim figure appeared on the roof of Emily's tavern. Her bright eyes watched as the window opened on the second floor. Her figure climbed up the rugged wall. It took almost only a second for her to get into Lin Ju's room. Lying slowly on the still warm bed, she stared at the dark room. After a long time, she slowly got up, and then jumped down from the window. The style of Gotham Central District is somewhat different from that of Gotham East District. Even at midnight, the place is still bustling with lights and feasting, and is filled with men laughing and women drinking coquettishly. From time to time, there are also fights between men. Walking on the road with remaining snow, Lin Ju's eyes slowly looked at the prosperity that belonged to the center of Gotham. "Oh, brother, Judge," a white man came to Lin Ju and couldn't help but pat him on the shoulder. Lin Ju had no intention of turning around and talking to him. This made the man who thought he was an actor a little annoyed. "You know what, brother, this is the central area. Even Batman can't do anything to us. How dare you come here to show off in this costume? Ha, the judge is nothing. Batman, we don't take him seriously, do we, brothers?" Ha. The whole neighborhood is filled with chaotic laughter, and there seems to be no trace of kindness at all here. Drinking, ridicule, grinning, and interspersed with drug dealing, it is like a paradise of sin. Boom! He slapped Lin Ju hard on the head. The man smiled ferociously. The next moment, he took out a sharp blade from behind with his left hand and was about to stab the man in front of him. Boom! His figure was like a cannonball, crashing into the open shop on the side. In an instant, the oil and water in the hot oil pan outside the shop sprayed down and poured on him. Ah! With shrill screams, mixed with the sound of hot fried meat, the crowd sitting outside the shop dispersed. A big man with a bald head and tattoos suddenly pulled out a butcher's knife and rushed towards Lin Ju. However, the next moment, an afterimage flashed by. The big man's body was like a cannonball, hitting the wall heavily, and blood flowed to the side. Splashed, causing the smiling hip-hop man watching on the sidelines to be instantly splashed with blood. The big man's body was embedded in the wall and instantly lost its life. "It's really the judge." I don't know who screamed in surprise, and the criminals who originally looked arrogant all showed fear. Combined with the bloody scene in front of them, everyone felt a chill deep in their hearts. At this moment, Lin Ju, who was standing in the center of the field, his black robes flying, his tall figure also exuded a strong pressure. Chapter 51. Poof! A hand broke into the man's chest, feeling the warmth inside. Lin Ju pulled his hand out of the man's flesh and blood, watching his weak body fall to his knees. The sound of gunshots started one after another in an instant. Countless sparks mixed with bullets flew towards him. At this moment, the criminals on this street all opened fire. However, where Lin Ju originally stood there was only an afterimage left. The bullets passed by and instantly hit the criminals who were firing together on the opposite side. In an instant, with gunfire and screams, the neighborhood was in chaos. Lin Ju's figure walked quickly and came to a criminal who was switching ammunition. He grabbed his head with one hand and slammed him to the ground. Boom! The watermelon breaks and juice splashes everywhere. A tall and thick white man on the side fell to his knees in an instant. His face was pale, his whole body was shaking, and he was stunned in place. The next second, Lin Ju's figure came behind him, and the man's head had been twisted, and his burly body fell heavily to the ground. At the same time, pedestrians outside the street stopped one after another. The gunshots and screams coming from inside the street attracted their attention. A man covered in blood quickly ran out of the street and looked at the people driving their motorcycles outside. "Fark, he's killing us." The man looked pale and yelled like crazy. The next moment, his body fell heavily to the ground. People looked in panic and saw a machete stuck in his back. Shit! A young man driving a motorcycle couldn't help but curse, and then drove the motorcycle away at high speed. This operation was like turning on a switch. In an instant, the criminals wandering on the street fled in all directions. With the last gunshot inside the block, Lin Ju, covered in blood, slowly walked out of the street and gently shook off the blood on his hands. At this time, even he himself didn't know why he took the action he did today. His purpose tonight was not actually that. As his body moved, Lin Ju's figure turned into afterimages and disappeared here. With a violent roar, a black and extremely cool motorcycle sped over and stopped at the intersection of the street where the accident occurred. A man in a black leather jacket and a black bat mask jumped off the cool and stylish motorcycle and ran quickly towards the inner part of the street. Before he entered the street, he seemed to sense something. He slowly lifted up his boots, which seemed to be stained with something. Wherever he looked, his pupils shrank slightly, and with a strong smell mixed with red mucus, Bruce Wayne put his feet down and ran into the street. He froze on the spot. What he saw before him were corpses everywhere. Some had a fist-sized hole in their chests, some had countless bullet holes in their bodies, and some had their heads turned 180 degrees. There is no one left alive in this sinful street. His eyes were deeper than ever before, and as the sirens wailed from the street behind him, he quickly returned, got on his motorcycle, and sped away. In a magnificent manner, accompanied by sweet symphony, a man in a suit and leather shoes supported his dance partner and swayed in the hall. Their dancing postures were very suitable. With their hands slightly swaying, the graceful female dance partner came quickly. With her legs crossed high, she turned around gracefully and looked back at the old man sitting in a wheelchair beside her, showing a knowing smile. Bang bang bang. Rod Sionis couldn't help but clapped his hands and applauded, with admiration and a hint of unexplainable meaning in his eyes. Master. A middle-aged man wearing a tuxedo and a high collar slowly came to the old man and pushed the wheelchair behind him as if to take him away from the place. A dangerous guy has come to the central area. Danger. Ha ha. The old man smiled as if he had heard some joke. Soon, under the leadership of the middle-aged butler, his wheelchair was pushed slowly out of the manor. At this moment, black cars were parked outside the manor. The middle-aged butler sent the old man into one of them. The car sped off, speeding away from the manor. One black car after another followed closely behind. Until the vehicle slowly drove into an abandoned cemetery, the middle-aged housekeeper and the old man walked slowly through the dark woods until they arrived in front of a certain grave. As the tombstones slowly unfolded to the side, a dark passage appeared in the original cemetery. At the butler's signal, two men in suits followed him, and the four of them quickly walked into the passage. Slowly taking out a mask from the wall on the side and putting it on his face, the old man looked calm as he walked deep into the cemetery. At this moment, in the dark cave under the tomb, in the marble basement, there is a huge round table. Several men wearing masks are already sitting on the edge of the table. All of them have the same mask, owl. As the old man arrived, one of the men slowly stood up from the round table. Everyone, Gotham seems to be getting out of our control step by step. Control? Who? Not even the Wayne family can resist us. A taller man roared sharply, and his words were instantly echoed by two of them. Sir, do you know what the factor is? An old woman's voice sounded slowly, and the man who stood up at this moment looked around, his eyes swept over the people wearing owl masks. Why are all your attention focused on that bat? In my opinion, he is not to be feared, but a ridiculous person who holds a sense of justice in his heart and claims to be a righteous person. Now we have a real opponent. He is extremely cruel and more brutal than criminals. Unlike Batman, the vicious criminals have only one way to die in his hands. He seems to be targeting us. The low words echoed in the underground tomb, and the people of the Court of Owls slowly stared at each other, and everyone suddenly thought of the existence that has become famous recently. Judge, a word echoed in the silent room, and everyone turned their eyes to the speaker. He. The man put his hands on the table and smiled, and his eyes paused slightly on Rod Sionis, who had been silent. That guy doesn't seem to be an ordinary person. He chuckled. Of course he is not an ordinary person. My men just told me that there was a riot on 13th Street, and the bar and personnel there suffered heavy casualties. No, everyone in that block died. A young man spoke, and he seemed a little excited, with his chest rising and falling slightly. Is that guy warning us? The atmosphere in the whole place was quiet. Lin Ju didn't know how he returned to the East District. What happened tonight was something he didn't even expect. When did I become like this, and actually kill them all? Reminiscent of the fact that he killed criminals before to accumulate energy and punish their crimes at the same time, but what happened tonight broke his view of himself. Killing people like hemp, nothing more than that. It seems I really need to make some adjustments. Lin Ju took a deep breath, his face darkening. Slowly and quickly jump and climb from the wall on one side, return to his room, and look at which room on the open bedding he got in. Suddenly, it was dawn. Sensational sensation. The violent roaring downstairs woke up Lin Ju. He stood up from the bed and came to the window, leaning his head down. It was the same group of people from yesterday again. The pretty girl stood in the crowd and kept saying something loudly. From time to time, someone walked into the store and started to cut the walls and decorate it. Lin Ju walked down the stairs, the noisy shouts outside the door instantly filled his ears, and he slowly arranged his messy hair. "Good morning, Lin, you're asleep again." Emily came to him quickly, stood in front of him prettily, looking at him with a gleaming star in her eyes. "Morning." Looking at the cute girl in front of him, Lin Ju couldn't help but reach out and poke her round little head. The girl's face turned red and she ran away in a panic. On the other side, Dam came to Lin Ju's side with an anxious face. Lin Ju, who knew why his friend was in such a state, could only smile helplessly. "Lin, did you hear about Batman's massacre on 13th Street last night?" Quote. "Oh my god, I can't believe why Batman turned out like this. To be honest, I've always thought he was the real non-killing hero, but last night really shattered my fantasy." "How was your action last night? It's a good thing you didn't meet him. I feel like Batman must have been driven crazy by those fools." Lin Ju reluctantly put aside Dam, who was chattering behind him. The two came to the bar and randomly found a relatively free table. "What, did you do it?" Dam looked at Lin Ju in shock as he slowly recounted what happened last night. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He didn't know what to say at this time. "I think I need to take some time off." Lin Ju smiled bitterly. Slowly patting Lin Ju's shoulder, Dam looked solemn. "It's not your fault. Gotham is full of evil. Even Batman is often forced to disappear." Dam's tone changed. "While we have a few days rest, how about we take a nice stroll? Take Emily with you." "Can." "Ha ha." Dam couldn't help but jump up. He had long wanted to visit the Huola Museum, Oster Amusement Park, and Jinbu Movie City. But there has been no one to accompany him, and now, with the judge by his side, there is nothing more worth looking forward to than a trip like this. Soon, Emily couldn't help but cheer softly after hearing the news. Dam said that he paid for the travel expenses, which made the girl very excited. The next day, Jodson was pulled to her bar by Emily and readily agreed to help decorate Emily's pub. In this way, Dam took Lin Ju and Emily on a journey to Boston. Looking at the forest speeding past outside the window, Lin Ju felt a peaceful atmosphere for the first time in a long time. Boom! She slammed 3 boxes of instant noodles on the table, and Emily, who had her little head on Lin Ju's shoulder, woke up instantly. Hey. Dam looked excited. "Emily, have something to eat first, we'll be arriving soon." "Oh." Emily's face turned red and she slowly moved her head away from Lin Ju's shoulder. With the persuasion of the two of them, Lin Ju reluctantly joined the group of instant noodles eaters. Alas, what is it like to eat instant noodles at this time? Just as the 3 of them were getting excited from eating, the middle-aged man sitting behind Dam stood up and turned to stare at Emily. The look of flesh on his face made Emily so frightened that she couldn't help but shrink her head. Lin Ju's originally gentle eyes suddenly condensed, but Dam immediately stood up and faced the big man, looking at Bai with a fierce look in his eyes. He is also a big man who is a head taller. "Sir, what's wrong with us eating instant noodles?" Dam frowned and glared at the big man, showing no signs of cowardice. Yo-ho! There were joking sounds on one side, and many passengers showed interested eyes, watching the next moves of the 2 men, one tall, one thin, one fat and one strong, as if they were expecting something. The big man slowly reached out and subconsciously slapped Dam's head to the side, but a hand instantly grabbed his wrist. "Ha, brat, what do you want to do?" Dam, who had his eyes closed, preparing to be beaten, suddenly opened his eyes and glanced at the big man with some gloating as if he was aware of him or something. "I helped you avoid disasters, and you still don't appreciate it." He silently stepped aside and looked excitedly at Lin Ju, who was holding a burly muscular arm with one hand. There's nothing better than watching a judge beat someone up. "Excuse me." Behind him, Lin Ju felt someone tugging at the corner of his clothes. Looking at Emily's worried eyes, he slowly turned his head expressionlessly and stared at the big man. Quote. Brat. In an instant, he waved his fists together and was about to hit Lin Ju's head. Emily screamed at the side. However, at the next moment, Lin Ju exerted force with one hand and instantly dragged the burly man in front of him. With a punch as fast as an afterimage, he hit his generous chin hard. Boom! The whole person flew upward instantly. Under Emily's exclamation, Lin Ju slapped the man's figure to the ground with another palm. In an instant, the people at the front table stood up one after another, as if they wanted to defend their partners, etc. At this time, the strong man who was knocked to the ground shouted in panic, staggered up from the aisle, and looked at the Asian man standing in front of him expressionlessly with a fearful look on his face. I'm sorry, I was reckless. Quote. His companions all looked surprised, never expecting that his arrogant and domineering friend would one day give in. The big man looked at Lin Ju timidly. It wasn't until he slowly sat back to his original position that he breathed a sigh of relief. Then he quickly got up and quickly pulled his partner back to his seat. What's wrong with you? That guy took advantage of you and knocked you to the ground, and even subdued you. Shish, the idea is tough, let's be a little bit naughty, let's think about the reason why we left Gotham. It's not because I don't want to die miserably in the hands of those monsters. Quote. This guy. Emily looked at Lin Ju with some distress until she looked over his whole body and found nothing, not even a corner of his clothes was messy. Emily, don't worry, Lin knows Chinese kung fu, it's not easy to teach those guys a lesson. Dam shouted excitedly, but Emily glared at him in an instant. Dam shrank his head and covered his mouth with one hand. Woohoo! Dam couldn't help but exclaimed. His long golden hair that was originally scattered behind his head was fluttering in the wind. Lin Ju, who was sitting next to him at the moment, looked calm and looked straight ahead. One of his hands grabbed someone beside him. A tight little hand. At this time, Emily's eyes were closed and her face was pale. The roller coaster slowly drove up the high slope, and then rushed down again. Dam roared excitedly. Yes, this is the first stop for Lin Ju and others, the Boston Central Amusement Park. Feeling that the tightly clenched hands in his hands were slightly relieved, Lin Ju turned his head and looked around. He was a little surprised to find that the girl next to him who had her eyes closed opened her eyes at this moment, her big eyes shining with crystal luster mixed with a hint of excitement. Good guy. This adaptability is too strong. As the roller coaster slowly reached the end, Dam stepped out of the carriage with excitement on his face, looking like he was still unsatisfied. Lin, how is it? Isn't it exciting? Quote. Looking at the expectant eyes of the girl next to him, Lin Ju smiled and nodded. Ever since he had deprived him of his blood ancestor, he would not feel panic even if he jumped from several floors high. This kind of roller coaster could not even make a ripple in his heart. Let's go to the haunted house. Dam looked excited. Unlike Lin Ju, it was his first time to experience the joy of a roller coaster. Equally excited was Emily. The two of them were yelling as if they had never seen the world before. Lin Ju followed closely behind them. As night fell, the three of them drove slowly through the bustling streets. The atmosphere here is really good. It doesn't have the always gloomy sky in Gotham. How about we move here in the future? Dam said with some excitement that it was rare for him not to see robberies, murders, drug trafficking and other vicious incidents happening on the streets. Quote. I want to protect my tavern. Emily looked determined. This made Dam on the side not know what to say. This world is not peaceful no matter where it is. Lin Ju looked directly at the deep streets in front of him, and the laughter of children could be heard around him. Soon, the three of them arrived at a magnificent shopping mall. It was rare to see such a bright shopping mall. Emily excitedly rushed towards the shelves nearby. Dam rushed towards the snack shelves filled with all kinds of food, looking like he wanted to sweep them away. Lin Ju stood outside the store inside the mall, watching the two people's shopping activities. Ah, there's been a robbery. Suddenly, an exclamation rang out, and the originally noisy shopping mall erupted into commotion again. Lin Ju curiously walked to the aisle and looked down. A man wearing a cloth hat quickly shuttled through the crowd, holding a leather bag in his hand and looking crazy. The noise caused by the movement downstairs obviously attracted the attention of Dan and Emily, and more people noticed what was happening downstairs. That guy dared to rob in public. Dem said words that seemed not to be spoken by Gothamites. Lin Heng's eyes quickly glanced at the stairs aside. Under reflex, he was ready to go down and subdue the man. Just as he jumped down from the stairs, amidst the exclamations of everyone, a golden figure shuttled through the crowd at high speed and knocked the man to the ground instantly with a punch. At the same time as the figure appeared, people's exclamations echoed throughout the square. Wonder Woman. Oh my God. This guy is finished. Lin Ju felt a strong sense of fear rising in his heart, and subconsciously he stopped in front of the aisle. With his extraordinary perception, he could feel a powerful life force field that could threaten him. The tall and well-proportioned figure is covered in armor with a golden halo. Under the straight bridge of the nose, the slightly raised corners of the red lips exude a confident temperament. At this time, one of her arms was covered with a golden armband, covering her chest. Lin Ju was shocked when he saw the woman's appearance. Wonder Woman. Diana, who knocked the man down with one punch, opened her slender and round thighs and kicked the man to the side, who slowly took out a pistol. The gun in the man's hand was instantly kicked into the air. This turned out to be a gang crime. The criminal gangs who knew what had happened jumped out of the crowd one after another, took out their pistols and started shooting, trying to stop Diana. However, the next scene shocked everyone present. Diana's figure flashed through a golden stream of light, and countless bullets shot past, but they were blocked by her raised wrist guards. A ricocheted bullet was fired at Lin Ju. Lin Ju, who was waiting for a reaction, suddenly froze. Diana appeared in front of him at an extraordinary speed and closed her arms to block the bullet, and then quickly passed in front of him. I was actually saved by someone else. On the other side, Dan pulled Emily, and the two of them rushed down from the elevator entrance with eager expressions on their faces, and quickly came to Lin Ju's side. Oh, is this guy a god? He can block bullets out of thin air. Dan looked at the armored woman rushing toward the criminals in a hail of bullets with shock on her face. God indeed. Lin Ju said silently in his heart that Wonder Woman Diana is the descendant of the Amazons and Zeus. Although she is half human and half god, she has power that rivals the gods. Boom! A harsh sound of metal collision resounded in the hall. With the security personnel on the side not daring to get close, Diana quickly punched, one at a time, knocking the frightened criminal to the ground. Looking around, under the adoring gazes of the passers-by, she slowly walked up to a little girl, met her surprised and adoring gazes, and rubbed her little head. Then she suddenly turned around, pulled out a golden whip from somewhere behind her, and hung it in midair. The figure quickly shuttled over the crowd until she jumped out of the gate, and her figure rippled and disappeared from people's eyes. This unusual way of leaving the scene once again shocked this group of ordinary people and praised them repeatedly. Some people even chased him out of the shopping mall, following the figure with a golden halo. Okay, I take back what I said before about staying in Boston. Dem was slapping his lips, and said dryly. He thought that Boston had such a being who could be called a god, but there was still crime. So what kind of power did the super criminals hiding in the depths of darkness have? As for Emily, she kept looking at Lin Ju, as if to see if he was hurt. Lin Ju suppressed the surprise in his heart, suppressed the sense of crisis that came from his subconscious just now, and then left the mall with Dan and Emily. The security personnel of the mall also began to escort the criminals away from this noisy place. In the bustling night market, the three of them walked slowly on the road to the hotel. On a certain building that they could not perceive, a figure sat quietly on the eaves of the top of the tall building, looking directly at Lin Ju's back. Strange breath. The next few days were surprisingly peaceful. Lin Ju took Dan and Emily to visit most of Boston's scenic spots. They even saw a sculpture standing in the center of the central square, Wonder Woman. The sculpture is engraved with lettering and the date, 1915, next to it. 1H, Shet, I'm such a, then what's that classic Chinese word? Dan looked at Lin Ju for help. The frog in the well. Ah, yes, I am really a frog in the well. The young and beautiful lady we saw yesterday actually existed in 1915. Shet. During this period of time, he not only traveled around the scenery, but also after experiencing what happened that night, Dan intentionally inquired for relevant information. Now he only feels that the exclamation in his heart cannot be contained at all. Even Emily beside him can't help but wonder. Respect. For ordinary people like them, it is unimaginable that their appearance can remain unchanged for such a long time span from that time period to now. Different from them, Lin Ju frowned tightly. Behind Wonder Woman, there was a thick stone sculpture. The appearance of this stone sculpture was not clear, as if it was covered by something. At first glance, it looks like a stone as tall as a person. When I looked at this sculpture with bright eyes, I found that there were no words engraved on it, and it stood there as if it were a foil. Gotham East Side. Wow. Emily looked excited and rushed into a bar that was beyond recognition, with luxurious floor-to-ceiling windows and a quaint interior. This is my bar. Boom. Bang bang bang. The confetti chimney erupted instantly. Jordanson and others who were hiding behind the door held the confetti tubes in their hands. In an instant, colorful confetti sprinkled down. Emily looked at Jodson, who was smiling in surprise. Uncle Jodson, is this really my bar? Haha, the money you gave me still has some remaining budget. Jodson said with a smile. Surprises came one after another. An excited smile appeared on Emily's little face, and she quickly ran to each dining table, looking at the brand new tabletop that had been carefully arranged, and observing the detailed patterns on it. She kept cheering and looked very excited. Even Lin Ju, who later entered the bar, was a little surprised to see the brand new bar. Compared with the previous narrow and crowded bar, the current bar was almost twice the size. At the same time, the decoration was more exquisite, and there were warning signs. It is still hanging everywhere in the bar, without losing the original warm and harmonious flavor. Good guy. Why is this bar so big? Dam walked in a little irritably, looking at Jodson, who was looking at Emily with admiration. The rest of the decoration work was all done by this handsome uncle. Emily, who had quickly become familiar with the various decorations in the store, quickly rushed to the bar. Uncle Jodson, you must stay for a drink, Emily said quickly while running towards the wine rack. Seeing Emily's excited look, Jodson's face showed a loving smile, and his eyes paused slightly on Lin Ju. The two looked at each other and smiled, nodding. Soon, one after another laughter resounded in the bar, and the regulars who came to check out Emily's tavern as usual were attracted. With the arrival of a famous guest, the atmosphere in the bar became more and more lively. Lin Ju quickly walked to the wine table and brought bottles of beer prepared by Jordanson to the bar. Hey, have you heard about it recently? Yeah, I heard that Batman was severely injured by a group of mysterious people. This will cause another wave of crime. Shish, Emily's tavern is newly opened today, don't discuss these things. Ah, okay. Listening to the words behind him, Lin Ju could get the information he wanted from different words even in a noisy environment. Looking out the window of the bar, as night falls, there are fewer and fewer pedestrians around, and from time to time, a motorcycle speeds by. The originally peaceful night on Wallier Street seemed to have changed again. A famous customer said goodbye to Emily with a smile and walked out of the store. Lin Ju came to Dam. At this time, there were 4 empty bottles of whiskey placed in front of Dam's wine table. His face was slightly drunk. Do you want me to send you off? No, haha, I'm happy today, but I accidentally didn't control it. Dam shook his fat arms, with a big smile on his face, and then stood up unsteadily. His home was actually not far from Emily's tavern, and he would be there in a short time. Watching her friend slowly walk out of the store, Emily tiptoed behind Lin Ju. Listening to that familiar heartbeat, Lin Ju did not turn around, deliberately pretending not to notice. Ha! Suddenly the little head exposed from one side made a grimace, and Lin Ju's body trembled subconsciously. The success scared Lin Ju, which made Emily couldn't help but cheer excitedly. Lin Ju smiled helplessly. Dam is actually still in school, Emily said while putting away the wine bottles on the table. Going to school. He does look young. I heard that I was always bullied in school. I haven't gone to school since this year. Alas. There is such a thing. Lin Ju frowned subconsciously. Dam had always given him the feeling of being full of sunshine and humor, which made him subconsciously ignore the scene when he first met Dam. The people who seemed to be beating him at that time were indeed wearing clothes similar to American college uniforms. Of course, they were just some of them. When the two of them finished cleaning up the bar, it was almost midnight. After saying goodnight to each other, they quickly fell asleep. At this time, in the Gotham Police Department in the center of the East District, the police officers who came and went were still busy at work. Alas, has the judge been silent for many days? A police officer complained. Yes, the number of alarm cases has increased every day in the past few days. It feels like we are about to return to the old days. What a joke. When will the super criminal be responsible for maintaining order? Do you know what you are talking about? Quote. You are noble, you are awesome, you will lead the charge next time. Quote. The black police officer looked miserable, with two thick dark circles under his eyes. Although he could not see anything from the outside. At this moment, he had not slept for nearly 3 days. Bang! The sound of glass breaking rang out, and a police officer couldn't help but yell angrily, but a car passing by the police station sped past. Shouts rang out one after another. A police officer instantly drew out his pistol and rushed out of the door, but was quickly stopped by his colleagues. Calm down. George, who was at the back, yelled angrily, with a trace of humiliation on his face. He sat back in his seat somewhat dejectedly and threw the brick on the table out through the broken window. Boom! A house collapsed instantly, a truck carried a rocket launcher on its shoulders, and a man in a mask shouted loudly. The surrounding ordinary residents fled in all directions, and soon, as the alarm bell rang, a bright police car with red and blue lights flashed over. After a while, a gun battle between the police and the gangsters began directly on the street. George looked ugly and hid behind the door of a police car, shooting from time to time. These lunatics! The old police detective cursed angrily, and the next moment, his expression changed wildly, and he quickly left the police car next to him. As a cluster of flames flickered, under the cover of night, a beam of fire rushed straight towards him. In the blink of an eye, there was a violent roar, and the vehicle he was originally in was instantly blown away by the flames. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of the explosion shook the entire neighborhood. Police officers using vehicles as cover fell down one after another. One of the nearest police officers was instantly swept up by the flames. Ah! There were screams and curses mixed in. Compared to the police officers, the criminals cheered one by one. Just when the situation was intensifying, under the moonlight, a black figure walked quickly through the streets and alleys, looking at the man standing on the eaves, holding a gun and with colorful graffiti on his face. Without hesitation, he kicked the man's figure away hard. Boom! With the sound of his body hitting the vehicle, the man groaned in pain, and the movement behind him diverted the attention of the criminals. Batman! The face of the man who was closest changed. He was about to take out a gun and shoot at the next moment. However, the man in black robe instantly grabbed his gun-holding wrist, twisted it hard, and with a painful scream, Bruce kicked him. Kicked the man's body away hard. He crashed directly into the companion behind him who was about to rush to help. The next moment, he took long strides, swinging his hands, and ran quickly towards the street on one side. Gunshots were fired one after another, and bullets fired from everywhere flew past. However, the man skillfully avoided them. A hand stretched out the obstacle, twisted quickly, and the shining batarang hit a man's chest instantly. Ah! The man let out a scream and fell to the ground. His partner quickly pulled out the dart from his shoulder. Looking at the darts that were still buzzing and vibrating, no one was surprised. Batman's high-tech equipment has long been famous in the Gotham underground world. The man who was carrying the rocket grenade instantly turned around, and his partner behind him quickly loaded the rocket grenade. As the loading was successful, a sinister smile appeared on the man's face. However, the next moment, a silver light flashed, and a trembling dart instantly stabbed his arm holding the rocket. Ah! The rocket launcher fell to the ground. The pale man covered his arms and jumped off the truck. Because the attention of the criminals was attracted, the police officers on the other side who were originally suppressed by fire started shooting, and in a short time, the arrogant criminals were beaten until they dared not show their faces. At the same time, due to the reversal of the situation, the criminals finally began to panic. Sensing the weakening of firepower, Bruce jumped out from behind the bunker and quickly came to a criminal who was loading bullets. He kicked his abdomen with a random kick, and with a fierce uppercut, he knocked the man straight away and jumped into the air. When he fell to the ground, the criminal fainted instantly. The panicked people on the side fired quickly with their guns. However, Bruce climbed up the rock wall at an extremely fast speed, and then jumped down to avoid the rapid fire. At the same time as the bullets came, a heavy flying kick instantly knocked over a criminal on the truck. At this moment, he was facing 3 criminals at close range. He quickly punched the 3 burly men to the ground in the blink of an eye. Boom! A hard punch hit the chest of the man who was trying to shoot. Poof! Spitting out a mouthful of blood, the bald man's body hit the truck hard, and the entire door was dented in an instant. He looked at Bruce, who was coming with a fist, in horror. However, the fist grazed his earlobe and hit the vehicle next to him heavily. A strong roar shook his eardrums, and he subconsciously squatted on the ground holding his head. Hoo ho ho! Bruce's chest was heaving violently, and there was a trace of bloodshot eyes in his eyes. He ignored the criminal who had collapsed on the ground with fear, and he quickly passed between the vehicles. Wherever he passed, people fell on their backs, and no criminal was his enemy. Just as he was passing a certain car, a baseball bat suddenly came from the side and hit Bruce hard on the head. Under the strong dizziness, Bruce's body fell slightly to one side. The criminal who seized the opportunity quickly stood up, stepped forward, took out the dagger in his arms, and stabbed Bruce's body fiercely. However, the next moment, the joy on the man's face had not dissipated, and a pair of strong palms grabbed his wrist holding the dagger. Click! Along with the sound of bones breaking, the man let out a painful cry. However, the next moment, a black shadow flashed in front of him. The next moment, accompanied by severe pain, he fainted and fell to the ground. Slowly retracting his knees, Bruce quickly hid towards the vehicle on the side, bright bullets passing through his body. His chest was rising and falling violently, and he didn't seem to be in particularly good condition at this time. On the other side, because the criminals were completely in disarray, the police officers who were pursuing the victory came out of the bunker one after another and began to rush towards the criminals' motorcade. Soon, as the police officers yelled and cursed, one by one the criminals were pushed to the ground. Seeing that the situation was over, the masked man looked hatefully at Batman, who was running into the alley. Immediately, he fired at the police officers rapidly, amidst the loud gunfire. His body fell heavily to the ground. Soon, George came to him. Looking at the raccoon mask, his expression sank slightly. He slowly opened the mask, revealing an unrecognizable face that was burned by the flames. "It's the Mask Club again." The old police detective cursed bitterly, while George's face was extremely gloomy. His eyes looked towards the alleys deep in the street, and his eyes gradually deepened. At this time, Bruce, who was running quickly through the alley, fell to the ground in an instant, and the blood on his head slowly dripped down his face. The old injury hadn't healed yet, so he finally couldn't stand it anymore and staggered to the ground. He slowly took off his special bat suit and stuffed it into the trash can nearby. Bruce leaned against the wall with some weakness. His mind became more and more trance-like, until there was the sound of vague footsteps, and he finally fell into coma. "Bruce Wayne, hey, man." There were anxious words in his ears, and Bruce opened his eyes slightly. At this moment, he seemed to be lying on someone's body. The body kept bumping up and down as the man ran, and finally, there was a clear ringing of a bell. "Damn, who is this guy?" One after another, either soft calls or questioning sounds, came from his ears, and then he felt that his body seemed to be laid flat on a soft sofa. Emily yawned and looked worriedly at the white boy lying on the sofa with thin clothes and a handsome face. "Damn, why did you send him to our store? Shouldn't he be sent to the hospital?" "Hey, the hospital is too far away." Damn scratched his head and said a little embarrassed, then looked at Bruce Wayne, who slowly opened his eyes suddenly lit up. "This guy is my classmate. I never expected that I would meet him here. He is the famous Bruce Wayne. Quote. Seeing Emily's confused expression and Lin Ju's silent face, Damn felt a little helpless. "What am I?" Bruce rubbed his head and slowly sat up from the sofa. "You fainted on the side of the road, I carried you here." Damn ran to Bruce with excitement on his face. "Ah, thank you." Seeing Bruce's confused expression, Dam's expression changed and he pointed at himself. "Don't you recognize me?" "Okay, you really forget things, what can I say? We are also in the same class, although I haven't been to school for quite some time. Dam's face looked a little depressed, and he shook his head. Excuse me. Bruce thanked him with a shameful expression. At this time, he also understood why he was here. He looked at Emily and Lin Ju, who were standing aside. Hello, my name is Bruce Wayne. Slowly standing up from the sofa, Bruce reached out his hand first and shook hands with Lin Ju and others one by one. Bruce, don't you live in the Central District? Why did you come to our East District? Dam asked with some confusion. Discussing business with friends. Ah. You were really young and promising. On the side, Lin Ju picked up a glass of water from the side and handed it over. Thanks. Looking at Bruce Wayne's still young face, Lin Ju's expression remained unchanged, but he couldn't help but marvel in his heart. The Bruce Wayne in this world also has a handsome and extraordinary face, and there is even a hint of youthfulness and frivolity between his eyebrows. Smell. He didn't expect that the first time he and the famous Batman would face each other would be in this situation. Looking at the dim sky outside, it was almost dawn. Thank you all. Bruce couldn't help but thank him again. After a brief conversation, he had already learned some information about Emily and Lin Ju under the introduction of Chatterbox Dam. Accompanied by the sound of beeping outside the door, an extended sedan appeared outside Emily's pub. Under Dam's warm farewell, Bruce got into the limousine and sped away. Watching the straight steps of the young man, Dam murmured in admiration. You have no idea how rich that guy is. Okay, it's getting late. Emily, please go upstairs and take a nap. Don't go back. Stay here until early in the morning and then go home. Okay, I will follow Lin Ju's instructions. Dam lay directly on the sofa where Bruce had been lying, and Emily also went back to the house to catch up on her sleep. Lin Ju came outside the door of the store and looked at the street that looked particularly quiet under the dim light. Boom. As the door was suddenly pushed open, the middle-aged man with an excited face quickly stepped into Emily's tavern and became the first guest today. The bustling pedestrians walking on the roadside sighed at the tranquility of life. What is different from the past is that the topic people are discussing today is the riots in the East District last night. Dam had already stood up from the sofa and helped Emily carry the plates and drinks. What? There was a riot on Wu Neighbor Street last night? Good guy. Luckily I didn't pass there last night. Dam patted his chest and chatted freely with a big man with a beard. When the conversation got emotional, they even drank each other's glasses. Batman came to our East District last night. I heard that if it weren't for him, those useless police officers would have been driven away by the criminals again. It made me laugh to death. All the residents on that street saw it. Those criminals got rocket launchers from nowhere and even blew up a small bungalow. Alas, poor people inside. I guess they never expected that they would be killed unexpectedly in their sleep. Take your own life. Lin Ju blocked Emily's inquiring sight and said with some righteousness, Boss, should we recruit new employees? Aha. Emily, whose sight was blocked, nodded her little head in a panic. In fact, she also noticed this problem. As the area of the tavern has further increased, there are now more and more customers. Lin Ju and Dam are the only two people. It was indeed difficult, especially when Dam was away. Boom. As the bar door suddenly opened, a guest who was about to leave the bar was knocked to the ground by the suddenly opened door. A man in a suit glared at the surrounding customers with a fierce expression. Lin Ju's eyes narrowed. Under his gaze, the group headed by the man in suit walked to the bar booth in a mighty manner, looking directly at the timid Emily. Boss, 2 cases of whiskey. A big man grinned ferociously and shouted loudly. His voice was like thunder in the noisy environment, which instantly made Emily flinch in fear. Lin Ju narrowed his eyes and walked slowly towards the man. However, at this moment, a small hand grabbed his arm. Emily shook her head palely. Knowing that this girl didn't want him to be hurt, Lin Ju suppressed the violence in his heart that had finally subsided. Dam, who was chatting with someone on the side, changed his expression, quickly turned around, and quickly came to the man in the suit, with a smile on his face. Brother, please sit down quickly, drink, and I will give it to you in person in a moment. Send it. Boom. With a casual slap, Dam was knocked to the ground. The man sneered, Where did you come from, fat guy? You didn't realize that we were talking to this beauty. Who gave you the courage to show up? Ah, sorry. Dam held Lin Ju's hand and stood up with his help, looking at the fierce people in front of him with a smile on his face. "Why are you like this? This street has been visited by judges." A regular customer of the tavern could not help but complain. However, the next moment, after a man in a suit pulled out a pistol and pointed it at his head, the regular customer turned pale and closed his mouth without daring to speak. The tavern, which was originally full of joy, fell into deathly silence. Under Lin Ju's gaze, this group of arrogant and domineering thugs in suits walked out of the tavern with great power, and all the guests in the tavern breathed a sigh of relief. While pretending to drink, he secretly glanced at this group of guys who were out of tune with the atmosphere in the tavern. The tavern that was originally full of laughter was extremely quiet at the moment. "Lin, if you expose your extraordinary skills, you will definitely give those guys who covet the judge an opportunity to take advantage of you." Dam couldn't help but patted his chest and said with some fear. Although he was expecting Lin Ju to teach these arrogant and domineering guys a lesson just now, the rationality in his heart told him that he must hold Lin Ju back. Because the judge had punished evildoers in nearby neighborhoods, this place must have attracted a lot of eyes hidden in the darkness. Boom! With the sound of the wine bottle falling to the ground and breaking, the leader of the gangsters stopped at the door of the tavern. "Starting from tomorrow, the development fund needs to be handed over here. If you don't pay on time, you know the consequences." Slamming the door of the tavern hard, the blonde man smiled evilly and walked away. "Oh my God, these guys. There is news that the judge seems to have been suppressed by a certain force, so now those ugly guys in the East District are starting to show up again." The judge was suppressed. No wonder there has been no news from him for so many days. My God, it seems we have to pay more attention in the future. Yes, thanks to the news about the appearance of the judge in Wallier Street, we were given a peaceful period of time. I didn't expect it to end so soon. Poor little Emily, People in the bar were in panic, and everyone was discussing the situation in the past few days and how things might change. Emily's face was pale, her little hands were holding a purple cloth and wiping the dusty wine bottle back and forth, her eyes were dull. A pair of big hands slowly took the bottle from her hand, bringing her back to reality from her worries and fears. "I almost forgot the time when I was bullied." Emily twitched the corners of her mouth and said, pretending to be relieved. Lin Ju smiled and couldn't help but hug this girl who looked strong but was actually fragile. It seemed that she finally had a vent, and Emily finally couldn't suppress the grievances in her heart, and crystal tears slowly dripped down her smooth and white cheeks. "We just expanded the tavern, why did something like this happen?" Emily couldn't help but rub her red eyes and murmured softly. Dam on the side also showed unbearable expression, but looked at Lin Ju. He knew that Lin Ju had not acted for a long time in order to suppress the violence in his heart, so as a friend, he could not ask Lin Heng to go. Do something. It seems that the plan will start ahead of schedule. What a plan! Dam's eyes suddenly flashed with light, and he looked excitedly at Lin Ju, who was expressionless at the moment. Since the last battle in which he was ambushed, Lin Ju, who felt that he was likely to be outnumbered in the future, had been thinking about a new deterrent plan. He had been considering the entry point, but now trouble came to his door. Lin Ju felt that it was necessary to talk to him about the forces hidden in the dark, in a more intimidating way. Night falls. A small grocery store. Bang, bang. Accompanied by the sound of the shelves being hit hard and falling to the ground, the old man looked mournful and begged the man in suits and ties in front of him. However, even though he burst into tears, the man kicked him hard and knocked his body to the ground, yelling and cursing profusely. Outside the shop, more and more newcomers were passing by in a hurry, but no one dared to stay or even watch the excitement. A white girl wearing a high school uniform and a knee-length skirt, her happy smile suddenly froze on her face. She stopped outside the street shop and stared blankly at the men in black walking through the shop, smashing things inside. The backpack in her hand slowly fell to the ground, and the girl rushed to the store like crazy. However, the old man who poked his head out of the store looked horrified the moment he saw her. No, don't come back. He couldn't help scolding the girl loudly, but the girl ignored him and rushed into the store. This change instantly attracted the attention of the men in suits. The man in black at the door of the store immediately hugged the girl with a smile on his face. "Haha, throwing myself into my arms, how embarrassing it is." The people in black around them laughed. The girl waved her fist desperately and hit the man in black hard on the chest. However, her strength was insignificant in front of this group of strong men who had been fighting all the time. "What are you doing? Let my dad go!" The girl screamed angrily, but even though she tried to sound fierce, her voice was still a little soft, which made the gangsters beside her even more excited. Even the other people who were carrying groceries put down their items, and all smiled and walked towards the partner who was holding the girl tightly in his arms. "No, no, my lords, I will pay the money on time, please let my daughter go." The old-looking man couldn't help begging, but at this time, no one heard his words, and one man couldn't help but touch the fair face first. His eyes fell on a certain bulge on the girl's shirt, and he scraped it away fiercely, unable to help but let out a lewd laugh. My lord, aren't you worried about the judge? That lord has been around before." The old man roared loudly, but the next moment, a fist hit him hard in the face. A gangster in a suit rubbed his fist, and then spat hard. "Old guy, how dare you mention that guy to me? Who does he think he is? What kind of judge? He has been dealt with by the big bosses a long time ago." "Ha ha, that's right, it's great to think that you are a transcendent. If he dares to appear in front of me, I will twist his head off." The girl struggled hard, but no matter how much she punched and kicked, she still couldn't break free from the shackles of the big man. She looked towards the dark street, looking at the dark corner, the depth of darkness that she was once extremely afraid of. Now she was looking forward to it with great anticipation, looking forward to the figure coming out of it. As the front door of the store slowly closed, under the old man's painful plea, these lawless men pulled the girl into the room that originally belonged to her. "Ah, Lord Judge, please look over here." The middle-aged man's body was lifted up heavily, and then he fell outside the shop. He was wailing wildly, and the surrounding neighbors occasionally looked at him helplessly. At this moment, everyone in this neighborhood was depressed. The man rushed towards the store again, but was kicked to the ground again. Powerless, his eyes gradually fell into deathly silence, and he lay flat on the ground, looking at the Gotham night sky without any starlight. There were strange roars of excitement from the men in the store. The man struggled to get up, but the pain all over his body and the feeling of weakness made him stumble and fall again. Just as he burst into tears, an unusually tall figure appeared in front of him as if teleporting. A terrifying atmosphere permeated this chaotic street. The blood-red robe was rolled up in the cold wind. This figure was nearly 2 meters tall. His face wore a wide, red mask. One corner of the mask could be seen as angular bone spurs, almost as wide as the shoulders of two people side by side, and his whole body was filled with a terrifying aura. All the residents on the block watching this scene fell silent, and a strong power shook the entire street. The riotous gangsters in the store looked outside the store. Slowly leaning down, Lin Ju, who had transformed into the blood god state, stretched out his broad palm and patted the stunned old man. Then, under his shocked gaze, he slowly walked towards the man's shop. "Judge, this judge is a judge, are you sure it's not an alien creature?" Boom, the man's head was slapped hard. At this time, the gangster leader ran out of the girl's room. He straightened his messy clothes. A blur of footprints could be seen through the suit. He slapped the girl with a panicked face. On the heads of his men, they looked at the tall figure slowly walking towards them. Who dares to pretend to be a ghost? Can this big guy be the judge? Some of them pushed aside the chaotic men, took out a pistol from behind, and fired at Lin Ju. With the roar of gunshots, Lin Ju's figure did not even tremble at all. The man looked stunned, thinking there was something wrong with the gun, and quickly fired a few more shots. With a fierce roar, one of the bullets hit the door on the side hard. In an instant, sawdust flew everywhere, and a deep hole appeared. In front of everyone, one gangster muttered with dull eyes. At this moment, everyone knew that there was no problem with the gun, but the man walking towards them seemed not to be afraid of bullets. The next moment, a red shadow flashed past, and the gangster's body in front of the door was like a cannonball, slamming into the wall beside it. The broken bricks and stones wrapped around the mutilated body fell outside the street corner. Everyone was stunned on the spot, looking at the figure who appeared in the man's original position as if teleported. He casually slapped a heavy palm on the back of the big man who was running away in panic. In an instant, his skin was torn open and his flesh was torn. Blood spurted out from the big man, and he fell heavily to the ground. Accompanied by gunshots one after another, the store was in chaos at this moment. However, in front of that burly figure, everything seemed to be in vain. Bang bang bang. Pulling the trigger frantically, the yellow-haired leader threw the pistol with the empty magazine to the ground with a desperate look on his face. Looking at the presence of the hands grabbing the legs of his subordinates, he was like the weakest ant at this moment. Accompanied by the crisp sound of bone cracking, half of his men hit him on his body, and blood spattered on his face. The blond man was stunned on the spot. Such a bloody and cruel sight completely shattered his line of defense. Slowly walking up to the man with a familiar face, Lin Ju looked at the man who was still arrogant and domineering during the day, expressionless, and slowly raised his foot and stepped towards the man's head. Following the crisp sound, Lin Ju looked to the side and poked his head out of the bedroom to see the girl. Seeing her look of fear mixed with admiration, Lin Ju couldn't help but feel a little surprised. With a slight nod, Lin Ju immediately moved the corpses out of the shop one by one. At this moment, the middle-aged man outside the shop was kneeling on the ground, constantly expressing his gratitude. Lin Ju didn't respond to him. He just pulled all the corpses out of the street and looked at the street, looking at the eyes one by one. There was surprise, fear and disbelief in these looks, but more of them were enthusiasm and admiration. The bright red robe slowly dripped with hot blood, dragging all the corpses outside the door, just when Lin Ju was about to leave. A black shadow jumped down from a house in an instant, and the shining silver blade in his hand struck Lin Ju's shoulder. Clang! Like the sound of metal clashing, a flash of shock flashed in the eyes of the man in black, looking at the being holding his own sharp blade with one hand. The next moment, he suddenly withdrew his strength, but found that his long sword was tightly imprisoned and could not be pulled out at all. A whip leg flashed past as fast as an afterimage. Seeing that he could not regain the blade, the man in black instantly let go. The moment he landed on the ground, he jumped away quickly. He narrowly avoided Lin Ju's seemingly dangerous attack. "Who are you? Where is the judge?" The man in black looked at Lin Ju, who was wearing a red blood robe and a red mask on his face, and shouted in a deep voice. However, the next moment, a blood shadow flashed across, and Lin Ju suddenly appeared beside him, hitting his shoulder hard with a casual palm. Boom! As if a ball had been hit, the man's body was like a cannonball hitting a nearby street shop. His bones seemed to be falling apart. He looked at him with a horrified expression and slowly stopped his hand, as if he had just done a small thing casually. Just when Lin Ju's figure slowly turned towards him, 3 figures jumped out from the darkness, and 3 sword lights flashed towards Lin Ju quickly and sharply. Looking at these familiar figures, Lin Ju's lips curved into a smile. In this state, he has the double-sided enhancement of the body of the ancestor and the body of the blood god. His physical fitness is far higher than before. Whether it is strength, speed, or even self-healing of wounds, it is far from what he used to be able to match. The next moment, what happened completely shocked everyone. The legs that turned into afterimages stepped on the chests of 3 men in black almost at the same time. In an instant, the men in black who had been able to suppress the judge flew out instantly, spitting blood one by one. They fell to the ground and were unable to struggle for a moment. Fake, when did such a terrifying guy come to Gotham? Oh my god, I didn't expect that before the judge, I would actually wait for a more terrifying person. Who is this guy? The other 3 men in black who were originally ready to help stood frozen on the spot. None of them dared to step forward to take action. The unparalleled speed and strength, as well as the existence of defeating 3 of their partners at the same time, had made them realize that even if they added themselves, they would probably not be able to shake this mysterious existence. My name is the Blood God. I have been feeding on sin since I woke up from ancient times. I am now one of the 12 judges of the Judgment Council. It was like the sound of traveling through endless time resounded through the streets, and all the forces hidden in the dark, as well as the residents who didn't know the reason, were dumbfounded. Without giving them a chance to react, Lin Ju's bloody robe flew out of his body, and in the blink of an eye he turned into red shadows and rushed towards the assassins. In the horrified eyes of the people in black, the hands symbolizing death brushed their heads one by one. Click. Harley. The middle-aged man rushed to the store quickly. At this time, he was limping, but he was in high spirits. He rushed into the store in a panic and helped his daughter who fell to the ground. Dad, the life story of Harley Quinn's father was not found, please automatically substitute it here. Harley Quinn couldn't help but hug her father. They never expected that they would be saved at such a desperate time. Thank you, Blood God, thank you, Judgment Council. Ronquin looked around his daughter's body in panic and noticed that except for the messy outer clothes, she did not seem to have suffered any accidental damage. He breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Thank you, Lord Blood God. She couldn't help but kowtow to the dark street outside, but the girl's eyes were blankly looking at the shops with blood everywhere, but there was no trace of fear in her eyes, and she slowly stretched out her green-white jade-like hand. With her hand, she gently wiped the blood on the ground that she had been paying attention to for a long time. The girl couldn't help but lick it gently. A strange taste slowly rippled in her heart, and a scarlet color appeared in her heart. There was a flash in her eyes. The father began to sort out his belongings, completely unaware of the strange look on his daughter's face behind him. For about a quarter of an hour, black shadows quickly shuttled through the streets and arrived at a certain abandoned industrial building. In front of the man carrying a long sword behind him, a man in black was kneeling. Bang bang bang. A kick that was about to enter the afterimage kicked the man's body away hard. As the bricks and stones shattered, the man in black allowed himself to be embedded in the wall. Apart from a painful groan, he did not mean to defend himself at all. You are so frightened that you dare not face the enemy just because of your momentum. The man with two swords on his back shouted coldly. The man in black spit out blood and looked depressed. Just when the man was about to step forward and kill the man, the slender woman in black grabbed his shoulder. Now is the time when the organization needs people. The woman's voice sounded coldly in the empty hall, and all the people in black around them lowered their heads and said nothing. Putting the long sword in his hand back into its scabbard, the man snorted coldly, then turned around, no longer looking at this trash that made him feel so heartbroken. The man whose breath was a little weak knelt down in front of the man with two swords. Sir, that guy is definitely not a fake judge. His strength is far greater than the guy we dealt with before. He can even resist bullet attacks head-on. Moreover, the aura I feel from his body does not seem to be human. The man spoke very fast, with a trace of surprise on his face. Take bullets head-on. The man with two swords on his back looked at the men beside him. Under the signal from his eyes, the man in black raised his gun and fired at the man. A flash of sword light suddenly appeared, and the sound of huge metal collisions was heard. Under the admiring gazes of all the men in black, the man actually used his knife to chop off the bullets under his sword. As expected of you, the woman in black couldn't help but say in admiration. Her eyes glanced at the ground, and the concave bullet casing came into view under the dim light. Cutting off bullets with one knife is not something a human can do. At this time, the man in black who was kneeling on the ground couldn't help but said, will the judge be completely hidden because of our attack? He should have been completely left there last time. Judge, do you think the guy you besieged last time was him? The man carrying the two swords couldn't help but shouted coldly, and the woman in black on the side also turned her head. The two of them seemed to know some other information. Time goes back to that night. The man holding the collected sample handed the thermos flask-shaped carrier to the white-robed doctor. Under his strange gaze, a blood clot stained with red blood was placed on the slide. This, even the color is different, how can it be the same blood? However, this drop of blood seems to be extraordinary. The doctor looked suspicious. He stared closely at the blood samples under the microscope with a hint of surprise in his eyes. It doesn't look like that guy. The man with the two swords on his back looked a little ugly. When he first got the blood sample, he had doubts, but he still took it for verification. Of course not. This drop of blood seems even more magical. The doctor's tone was mixed with a hint of madness, as if he noticed some strange phenomenon in the blood, and his whole person seemed extremely excited. Under the gaze of the people in black, they slowly separated the drop of blood from the snow water, then took out a new needle to suck the blood, and finally injected it into a normal white mouse. The next moment, under everyone's shocked gazes, the white mouse let out a sharp neigh. The sound from its small body even resounded throughout the entire underground factory. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the white mouse's figure turned into afterimages. Crazy shock in a transparent glass cage. After much effort, the doctor, with the help of the man in black, controlled the little mouse that had undergone some kind of mutation. Looking at the sharp crocodile-like fangs exposed, the doctor's face was filled with emotion. In amazement. Wonderful, really wonderful. How could such a magical thing exist? Under the eyes of the people in black, the doctor cleared his throat and told his discovery with excitement. It is also a mouse approaching its twilight years. This mouse injected with red blood has reversed the rejuvenation of various organs in the body. In addition, it seems to be transforming into some kind of extraordinary creature. I may need to observe some other specific changes for a while, but there is no doubt that the value of this drop of blood is higher. The doctor stared closely at the crazy mouse that was imprisoned in the narrow glass tube at the moment, and said in admiration, a strange color flashed through his eyes. A gust of cold wind blew by, and the clothes of the group of men in black were blown suddenly in this unfinished building. The man with two swords on his back slowly came to the edge of the building, looking deeply at the chaos at this moment. Dark Gotham. It seems we need some help from local forces. He slowly turned his head to look at the woman beside him, their eyes intertwined. At this moment, in a deserted street, Lin Ju's figure shrank. After returning to his normal human body shape, he couldn't help but twist his neck. With the crisp sound of bones, he couldn't help but let out a comfortable sound, groan. He looked far away at an abandoned building not far from the street. With his extraordinary vision, he could clearly see the outlines of bodies hidden in the darkness. There are so many people. Slowly lifting off the blood-red robe on his body, Lin Ju couldn't help but admire in his heart when he looked at the healed body without any wounds. Of course, carrying those bullets was not to show off, but to show the power of his new identity. This is Lin Ju's plan. Since the last time, he has deeply realized that his identity as a judge alone cannot completely deter the evil forces hidden in the darkness. So he decided to find something new and throw out a mysterious and powerful organization, which was the Judgment Council. You must know that he is familiar with the DC universe, but he knows that Superman, who is almost invincible, hates the Northwest under Batman's operation, so he is not an exception. Although this universe may be slightly different from the one he is familiar with, but Lin Ju knew that the world was far more mysterious than he imagined. Haha, those guys really deserve their punishment. Dam laughed heartily, and the patrons in the tavern also laughed, and everyone cheered. I didn't expect that the judge is not a person, but an organization. God, this is the most exciting news I have heard since I was a child. Haha, an organization that judges crimes is in our East District. Now our crime rate will definitely hit a record low in Gotham. With a smile on her face, Emily walked quickly in front of the wine cabinet, and slowly hung the template painting just printed from the studio in front of her desk on the wall of her pub. There are two of them, one is a figure wearing a black robe and a black mask, walking on the street at night. The other one was customized by Emily based on the picture depicted in the latest daily newspaper, with blood as the main color and a taller and burlier red-robed masked man. Good guy, Emily, it's your brain that works so well. A shop owner from a neighboring store came over to drink and praised in surprise. He couldn't help but give a thumbs up to the girl with her little head held high. He took a swig of whiskey and threw his change and tip on the table. The next moment, he left the tavern and ran towards his shop. Humming a cheerful tune, Emily looked at the two huge portrait paintings neatly and symmetrically placed on the wall of the bar counter and nodded her head. Slowly placing the wine basket on the ground, Lin Ju looked at Emily, who was flying towards him at this moment, with a smile on his lips. Lin, what do you think? Is this a good idea? Emily looked at Lin Ju with burning eyes. Looking at the two huge portrait paintings placed on the wall, Lin Ju gave a thumbs up with a smile. Haha, thank you Judge, thank you Blood God. Emily raised a bright smile on her lips and sighed softly. The next moment, everyone in the bar responded loudly, and the whole bar looked happy. The sound penetrated the door of the tavern, causing pedestrians walking on the roadside to look over. This day is destined to be the joy of civilians and the suffering of criminals. Taking advantage of a break in work, Dam pulled Lin Ju to a corner of the bar with a fanatical look on his face. Blood God, oh my God, it's so cool. He quickly took out his mobile phone and placed the picture taken by a passerby last night in front of Lin Ju. He did not suspect the Blood God in Lin Ju at all. Lin Ju looked around and saw that he was standing in the middle of the street dragging a corpse with both hands. Lin, it turns out you have a helper. I'm afraid you are over 2 meters tall. This is rare. Dam said with a fanatical expression. At first, he was a little worried about his friends, but now, he is completely relieved. He can carry bullets, blast walls with his bare hands, and walk sideways in their Gotham. Is he the strongest among the trial council? Some netizens have already compared him to you. Dam's tone was extremely excited and he looked at Lin Ju with burning eyes. Quote. Is this important? His eyes flickered slightly, and after thinking about it, Lin Ju still concealed his dual identity. He understands that the unknown is the most powerful weapon. The character created yesterday will deter the evil forces who covet him in his subsequent journey of judging sins. While the two were chatting, the patrons of the tavern suddenly became noisy, and Lin Ju and Dam looked over in surprise. A woman with a graceful figure and elegant steps slowly walked towards the bar booth. There was a different kind of charm in her movements. Looking at the somewhat familiar figure, Lin Ju frowned slightly. Is it her? Huh, I'll go, big beauty. Wait, Lin, do you know her? Dam's facial expression changed rapidly, and he looked at Lin Ju in disbelief. At this moment, the woman who walked into the tavern was the woman Lin Ju had rescued before, and she was suspected of being Catwoman. Here, Lin Ju watched the version with darker skin by default. In addition, it does not revolve around the main line of the story, so the protagonist is not sure. Katrina's eyes quickly passed over the stunned men in the bar, and then she finally saw that familiar figure in a remote corner. A smile appeared on her lips, and her eyes slowly turned to Emily, who was looking at her blankly at the moment. Little sister, bring me a bottle of whiskey. Okay. Emily's face was slightly red as she looked at the tall woman who was half a head taller than her, and she responded with a smile. Soon, Emily placed the wine glass in front of Katrina, opened a bottle of whiskey, and then filled it up for Katrina herself. Green-white jade fingers picked up the goblet, swayed slightly, and then took a sip. A trace of rosy flashed across her fair and delicate face, and her big eyes seemed to sparkle with crystal luster, making Emily look at her from a close distance, a little stunned. What a nice view. Thanks for the compliment. Realizing that she had accidentally said what was in her heart, Emily ran away with a blush on her face. At this moment, Dam and Lin Ju, who had heard their words, looked at each other in confusion. After a while, Dam tentatively asked, how about I go and ask for your contact information? Quote. In the end, Dam still didn't have the courage to stand up, but told Lin Ju some recent things, including the incident where he saved Bruce Wayne, his classmates who had bullied him in school apologized to him, and the possibility that he was recent plans to return to school. Just when the two of them were chatting, the tall Katrina slowly came to their table with a swaying figure, instantly arousing cheers from some of the men at the tables around them. Lin, hello, my name is Katrina. Katrina looked directly into Lin Ju's indifferent eyes, and slowly stretched out her slender jade-like palm. Hello. After simply shaking hands with the woman who was highly suspicious of Catwoman, Lin Ju had a hexy smile on his face. The next moment, his smile became stiff. Soft fingers gently rubbed back and forth on his palm. Katrina's eyes flashed with a different kind of brilliance. Lin Ju subconsciously looked at Emily who didn't seem to pay attention here. The two people's hands slowly separated, and then Katrina smiled slightly and left silently. Dam, who had stopped talking at the side, stared at her leaving figure and gently wiped the corners of his mouth. What a nice view. Take it easy, this woman is not simple. Lin Ju angrily shook off Dam's arm on his shoulder. What, is that woman a super criminal? Dam's eyes widened, looking like he couldn't believe it. Lin Ju's words were unconvincing, but the judge's words had to make him cautious. If it were a super criminal, it would seem more exciting. Quote. Lin Ju walked away silently, he was about to start working. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.